Chapter 1004. In the last strike, Nye Tion's sword momentum was terrifying to the extreme, directly shattering the head of the 10,000 demonic dragons' sage body. Looking at the shattered sage's bones in midair, Nye Tion's eyes showed no mercy, only the coldest of killing intent. And Huailin looked at the scene in the void, his body stiffened, and he remained motionless, the shock in his heart showing on his face. The head of the 10,000 demonic dragon, the strongest of the 10,000 demonic dragon pool, one of the 4 pinnacles of the Sumer world, was dead. He died at the hands of Nye Tion, and his body was directly blown apart. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, and Huailin would never have believed it. Rui Qianyu's beautiful eyes flickered, and the surrounding space returned to normal, clear and bright, no longer dim. Her expression eased slightly, but her body trembled again, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Is he finally dead? Nye Tion stood in the void, but his eyes suddenly narrowed, and then his eyes flashed, and a huge deterrent force burst out, shrouding the void. Purring! At the next moment, a muffled sound rang out in the empty space, as if 2 invisible forces had collided with each other. Spiritual fluctuations. These 2 vibrating forces were caused by the collision of spiritual power. Just a moment ago, Nye Tion also thought that the head of the 10,000 demonic dragon was dead, but when he spread out his divine sense, he noticed a huge spiritual fluctuation in the space, and that aura belonged to the head of the 10,000 demonic dragon. The head of the 10,000 demonic dragon left a soul seal on all the dragon rings, and even used the power of the soul seal to control Qiushan, wanting to kill Nye Tion. At this moment, even if his body was gone, his soul didn't immediately disappear, but secretly lurked in the void, wanting to give Nye Tion a fatal blow. He hated Nye Tion too much, and even if he died, he wanted to drag Nye Tion down with him. Unfortunately, Nye Tion's spiritual sense was very strong, and he had the starry sky eye. Even the subtle spiritual fluctuations in the void could not escape his eyes. Head of the 10,000 demonic dragons, you could have kept your life for a few more days. Unfortunately, you're not willing to leave. Since that's the case, I'll kill you once and for all. Nye Tianling said coldly. The coldness in his eyes intensified as he activated his absolute tremor. A formless spiritual energy burst out and enveloped a part of the void. Boom! However, at this moment, a terrifying sound suddenly came from the sky. Then, the world trembled violently. Nye Tion frowned slightly and looked up at the sky. He saw that there was a huge spatial crack in the sky. It was as if the world was being torn apart by a huge force. Someone is coming through the void. Seeing the void crack, Nye Tion's eyes suddenly trembled, and an uneasy premonition emerged in his heart. Boom! In the next moment, the void crack shook, and then a figure walked out. It was a majestic old man. His whole body was surging with terrifying power, overbearing and wild. Heavenly Emperor Realm. Nye Tion's spiritual sense swept over, and his expression froze. He said the following words in his heart, Peak Level 9. The old man who suddenly appeared in the void was actually a Peak Level 9 Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artist. Nye Tion did not react for a moment. He never expected that a Peak Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artist would appear at this time. He's from the God Realm of the Heavens? Is he here for me? To kill me? Several questions appeared in Nye Tion's mind, and bean-sized beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Nye Tion immediately thought of this person as someone from the God Realm of the Heavens. But after a few seconds, Nye Tion calmed down a little, and his gaze became strange. In the God Realm of the Heavens, he basically knew all the Peak Heavenly Emperors, but he had never seen this old man in front of him. When Nye Tion's spiritual sense swept over again, another discovery made him even more shocked. He felt an extremely familiar aura from this person, Dragon Chi. This old man actually released a majestic and mighty dragon chi. That kind of boundless aura shocked him. Nye Tion was shocked, and the others were directly petrified, standing there in a daze. Only Emo Rushi was unaware, and continued to absorb the power of the altar. "You traitor, come out now!" At this time, the figure flashed, and its speed was incomparably fast. It was as if it disappeared into thin air, and then appeared out of thin air, directly landing less than a kilometer away from Nietian. Traitor? Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was puzzled for a moment. Then he understood that the traitor the other party was talking about was most likely the 1,000 demonic dragon chief. This person released a huge amount of dragon chi, and had a powerful dragon vein in his body. Obviously, he was related to the 1,000 demonic dragon chief. "Great Elder, save me!" In the next moment, a panicked voice sounded. It was the 1,000 demonic dragon chief, and he was actually asking for help. "Traitor, that spiritual fluctuation just now was released by you, right? You've been a traitor to the Guardian family for hundreds of years, and now that you're about to be killed, you only remember your Guardian identity at this time?" The old man angrily shouted. Although he was scolding, there was a sense of protection in his words. Guardian family? Hearing this name, Nietian suddenly froze. Could it be that the 1,000 demonic dragon chief was not from Sumeru world, but from this Guardian family? Guardian family, what kind of organization is it? It doesn't belong to Sumeru world, nor does it belong to the heavenly realm. Guardian family! Almost at the same time, the Sword Elder exclaimed. His voice was sharp. Nietian was stunned. Could it be that the Sword Elder knew about this power? Guardian family, so this family really does exist. The Sword Elder was shocked, and seemed to be muttering to himself. Nietian didn't have time to ask too many questions at this time, so he focused all his attention on the old man. At this moment, he understood that in addition to wanting to kill him, the 1,000 demonic dragon chief had also released a spiritual fluctuation to ask for help from the Guardian family. Great Elder, Hua Changfeng has never forgotten that he is a member of the Guardian family. I came to Sumer world to find the lost spirit dragon emperor ring. The 1,000 demonic dragon chief's voice once again sounded from the void, with a whimper, as if he was very sad. Oh! The great elder of the Guardian family was stunned for a moment, then immediately looked at Nietian and found that something was wrong. His face suddenly changed, and he couldn't help but stiffen. After a few seconds, the Grand Elder finally reacted. He pointed a finger at Nietian and opened his mouth wide, but he was so excited that he couldn't utter a single word. Oh no! Nietian saw the reaction of the other party and his heart sank. Obviously, the great elder of the Guardian family also took a fancy to his spirit dragon emperor ring. Chapter 1005. The great elder of the Protector clan stared at Nietian with a burning desire in his eyes. Spirit dragon royal ring. It's for the spirit dragon royal ring again. Nietian's eyes darkened and he cursed inwardly. The people from the 10,000 demons dragon abyss had their eyes on his spirit dragon royal ring. Now, a Protector clan had popped up and wanted the Spirit Dragon Royal Ring as well. What exactly was the Spirit Dragon Royal Ring? Great Elder, the dragon ring on this kid's hand is the only 9-star dragon ring in the world, the Spirit Dragon Royal Ring. Rumor has it that the Spirit Dragon Emperor Ring can be opened. At this time, the myriad demon dragon head's voice rang out. Under the blazing heat, it couldn't conceal its malice. Obviously, it was tempting the Great Elder to kill Nietian. Shut up! Before the 10,000 demons' dragon head could finish, the Great Elder roared and interrupted it. You idiot, that thing is a top secret of the Protector clan. How can it be leaked to others? This subordinate has misspoken. The 10,000 demons' dragon head seemed a little nervous. A weak spiritual fluctuation trembled in the air. Nietian, who was standing off to the side, was slightly taken aback. Based on their conversation, it seemed that the Spirit Dragon Emperor ring was a key that could open something. However, this key seemed to be a taboo of the Guardian clan, and could not be mentioned. The Spirit Dragon Royal Ring itself was already very terrifying. The Spirit Dragon seal inside the ring was vast and boundless. It was an unimaginable power. Such a terrifying thing was only a key. How terrifying was the thing that was waiting to be opened behind it? At the thought of this, beads of cold sweat appeared on Nietion's forehead. It was obvious that there was an even greater secret behind the Spirit Dragon Royal Ring. This was the reason why the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss and the Protector clan wanted the Spirit Dragon Royal Ring. After a while, the Great Elder calmed down a lot. He stared at Nietion and asked coldly, "Kid, where did you get the Spirit Dragon Royal Ring?" "That's my business. I don't have to tell you," Nietionling replied coldly, his expression returning to its original indifference. In fact, he did not know what was going on with this spiritual dragon emperor ring. He had only obtained it by chance. Moreover, it was given to him by the former president of the 3,000 Miniature Worlds Alchemist Guild, Huiyuan. Who would have thought that a small dragon ring would bring so much trouble to Nietion? The first elder was stunned for a moment. Clearly, he did not expect that Nietion would actually reply in such a domineering manner. Soon after, he laughed coldly and said, "Do you know that the Spirit Dragon Emperor ring belongs to the Protector clan? You should not possess it." His voice wasn't loud, but it contained an intense pressure. After which, a terrifying aura appeared in the air, enveloping Nietion. Nietion felt the space around him freeze in an instant, and an enormous force pressed down on him, almost wanting to obliterate him. Pooh! Nietion's figure swayed slightly, and he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. The other party had the strength of a peak heavenly emperor, and the oppressive aura contained the power of heaven and earth regulations, which was far from what he could resist. Nietion. When Rui Qianyu saw that Nietion was injured, she exclaimed. Her eyes flickered, and she actually wanted to use the 9-color pupils again. "I'm fine," Nietion shouted, indicating to Rui Qianyu not to be nervous. The person they were facing was a peak heavenly emperor martial artist. Even if Rui Qianyu opened all 3 pupils, she could not hurt the other party at all. Moreover, this first elder clearly did not want to kill Nietion directly. He still had many doubts that he had not solved. At this time, Nietion turned around and glanced at Emorushi in the 9-yin altar. He could feel that the power of the altar had become very weak. It seemed that it would end soon. The legendary sage body was about to awaken. After the guardian first elder appeared, he first paid attention to the myriad demon dragon head, then the Spirit Dragon Emperor ring. He did not notice the 9-yin altar, nor did he care about Emorushi. The Spirit Dragon Emperor ring is in my hands. It belongs to me. Nietion looked at the first elder and said coldly. He did not know what the Spirit Dragon Emperor ring meant, nor did he know what the Guardian clans were. However, he knew that the Spirit Dragon Emperor ring would never be given away. Courting death. The first elder's face suddenly sank, and he roared in anger. He was the first elder of the Guardian clans. No one had ever dared to speak to him like this. As the deep roar fell, a mysterious force rushed over. Nietion's face suddenly changed, and he quickly retreated, but it was too late. Pung! A terrifying force descended on him, and a glaring blood-red trace appeared in the void. Nietion's face was as pale as paper. His figure was like a small boat in the raging waves, swaying and swaying, as though he was about to fall. This elder will give you one more chance to speak. If your answer is not what this elder wants, there is only one word for you: death. The first elder's icy cold voice sounded out, his eyes releasing a murderous cold light. Spirit Dragon Emperor ring, how did you get it? The voice was low and deep, revealing a strong oppressive intent, making people feel suffocated. Nietion's entire body was dripping with blood, his aura trembling, his complexion pale. Only the determination in his eyes did not change from beginning to end. The other party's strength was too powerful. A casual attack was enough to instantly kill him. Humph humph. Suddenly, Nie Tianling laughed twice. The oppressive force enveloping his entire body did not make his sword intent yield. His body actually released a wild fighting intent. Fighting intent. An unyielding fighting intent. Everyone was stunned simultaneously, looking at Nie Tian in astonishment, simply not daring to believe the scene before their eyes. Nie Tian only had 9th level Deva being strength, but facing a peak heavenly emperor martial artist, he could actually still ignite a monstrous fighting intent. What kind of horrifying heart of martial Tao was this? The tenacity of his disposition made people sigh in admiration. The first elder was also stunned for a moment, his eyes revealing a look of horror. He had seen many monstrous class martial artists before, but he had never seen someone as fearless as Nie Tian. Ordinary Deva realm martial artists only had the qualifications to prostrate in worship in front of him. But Nie Tian could actually release a powerful fighting intent. Just based on this point, it was enough to shock the first elder. This boy's disposition is tenacious, his heart of martial Tao powerful. If he grows up, he'll definitely be very terrifying. The first elder's eyes quivered a bit, but the killing intent in his heart became even more obvious. He faintly had a feeling that if he did not kill Nie Tian today, there would not be another chance in the future. Not yielding. Thinking up to here, the first elder gave a cold laugh, his entire body revealing killing intent. Following that, an enormous aura was released, akin to an invisible mountain, crushing towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian groaned deeply. The sword momentum of his entire body bloomed. It was as if a sharp giant sword appeared around him, sharp to the extreme. Boom! A loud sound rang out and the void shook violently. Two powerful auras collided with each other. An invisible shockwave spread out, causing everyone to feel a tightness in their chest. It was as if someone had punched them in the chest. But immediately, the sword momentum around Nie Tian was directly crushed to pieces. An even more horrifying power pressed towards him. Chapter 1006. Kneel for me. The Grand Elder's eyes shone with a vicious light as he let out a furious roar and unleashed a powerful aura that bore down on Nie Tian with the force of Mount Tai. Nie Tian hovered in midair, his entire body covered in blood. His entire body was twisted and deformed by the enormous pressure, but the look in his eyes remained the same. He was fearless, unyielding, and unyielding. The Guardian Great Elder's strength was too strong, almost at the level of the 9 emperors of the Heaven Realm. In front of him, Nie Tian was just an ant that could be easily crushed at any time. But he didn't want to let Nie Tian die easily. He wanted to slowly crush Nie Tian's heart of martial arts, make Nie Tian crawl under his feet, and then kill him. Crushing a martial artist's heart of martial arts, this was the greatest humiliation to a martial artist, more cruel than killing him. But some people's heart of martial arts was so tenacious that it couldn't be changed by any external force. Having lived 2 lives, Nie Tian firmly understood that the heart of martial arts was more important than talent in martial arts. No matter what kind of situation he was in, no matter what kind of enemy he was facing, his heart of martial arts would never change. Heaven, earth, sun, and moon could be destroyed, but the heart of martial arts would never change. Nie Tian was under unimaginable pressure. This kind of power fell from all directions, completely unable to resist. He could only bear it. His whole body was dripping with blood, his body became twisted, and his face became abnormally ferocious. But what didn't change was the firmness in his eyes, the faith in his heart. Nie Tian Darren. And Huailin was dumbfounded, his eyes became blurred. The Guardian Great Elder's strength made him tremble with just a glance, and he had the urge to kneel down and worship him. Facing such a powerful enemy, Nie Tian was still able to rise up and fight back. His heart was truly fearless, the heart of a powerful expert. Crack, crack, crack. At this time, the sound of bones breaking sounded. Nie Tion's body trembled. His body almost turned into a sieve, blood crazily spurting out, staining the heaven and earth red. Still not kneeling? The great elder's eyes trembled slightly. He had never imagined that Nie Tion's martial physique would be so strong, even surpassing ordinary heavenly emperors. Furthermore, Nie Tion's heart of martial arts was beyond imagination. Even in the midst of intense pain and despair, he still refused to yield. "You want me to kneel? Dream on." Nie Tion's body was completely twisted, as if he would be torn apart in the next moment. He didn't know where he got his strength from, but his eyes flashed with a terrifying killing intent as he roared. When the Grand Elder sensed the killing intent in Nie Tion's eyes, he couldn't help but tremble, and he was astounded in his heart. What kind of person was he facing? At this moment, what he displayed was not despair and submission, but battle intent and killing intent. At this moment, the Great Elder was afraid. His heart was filled with fear. If Nie Tion didn't die today, he would definitely become his nightmare. "Brat, since you won't yield, then die." Thinking up to here, the Great Elder gave a cold cry. He did not dare to torture Nie Tion anymore. He had to thoroughly kill the latter. The insolent voice faded. The Great Elder extended his hand. A violent palm directly smacked over towards Nie Tion. Rumble. The mighty palm, heaven and earth trembled. The majestic power was akin to roiling waves, crushing down towards Nie Tion mercilessly. If this palm landed on Nie Tion, the latter would die without a doubt. The disparity in strength between him and the guardian Great Elder was too great. The disparity between 9th level Deva being and 9th level Heavenly Emperor, this was what any talent, limitless, and perseverance could not make up for. The palm force in the void landed ferociously, wanting to utterly exterminate Nie Tion. Nie Tion. In that instant between life and death, a clear voice sounded out. Rui Qianyu's eyes flickered, and she actually directly spewed out bloodstains. Icy blue ocular power gushed out wildly, like a blue wave surging in the air. Crack, crack, crack. Places that the icy blue ocular power passed through, space was directly frozen. Bang! A muffled sound rang out as the desolate frigid chi collided with the mighty palm in midair. The surrounding space was completely frozen, but the palm didn't stop there. It continued to smash towards Nie Tion, but its speed had slowed down a bit. Amen. When the Great Elder saw this scene, his brows furrowed, his gaze trembling. He never thought that in this unremarkable world, there was actually someone who could contend with him. Crack, crack, crack. The frozen space was unable to stop the palm force from advancing. Under the bombardment of the mighty palm force, the void trembled violently. Pieces of space shattered. That horrifying palm force was like an icebreaker advancing in the layers of ice, shattering the frozen space bit by bit. Fresh blood flowed out of Rui Qianyu's eyes non-stop, flowing onto her exquisite face. She already squeezed out the power of her blue pupil to the limits, but it was still unable to stop the horrifying palm force. Rui Qianyu. Nie Tion turned around with difficulty and saw Rui Qianyu's eyes bleeding non-stop. His heart trembled, the blood energy in his entire body immediately surged wildly. A terrifying aura was released. Bang! In the next instant an explosion sounded out in the void. Nie Tion finally broke through the Great Elder's aura oppression, his entire body surging with a horrifying sword intent. It was actually more than several times more horrifying than his sword intent previously. Soul of Sword Realm. Nie Tion immediately reacted. The aura oppression earlier actually created an opportunity for his sword Dao to break through, causing him to break through to the Soul of Sword Realm. How is this possible? When the Great Elder saw that Nie Tion actually broke through his aura oppression, his gaze trembled violently, astonishment to the extreme. The aura oppression of a 9th-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist fused with super strong heaven and earth law power. It was sufficient to oppress martial artists below 5th level Heavenly Emperor to death. How could Nye Tian's mere 9th level heaven being strength possibly break through the aura oppression? His sword momentum. In the next instant, the great elder detected something, his gaze trembling once more, the astonishment on his face intensifying. How could he possibly think that not only did his aura oppression not make Nye Tian submit, it created an opportunity for the latter to break through to Sword Dao realm instead? But the great elder calmed down right away. Even if Nye Tian's Sword Dao realm broke through, that was also useless. It merely made him gasp for a few more seconds. At this time, Nye Tian's figure leaped up, standing tall in the sky, his virtually contorted body releasing a massive sword intent. Torrential blood energy surged wildly in the space, rampaging and colliding. Burning blood energy, is it? The great elder looked at Nye Tian. Sensing the bloodthirsty and murderous air in the space, he actually smiled cold, full of contempt. In his eyes, Nye Tian was just an ant. No matter what kind of move he used, it was impossible to contend with him. When Rui Qinyu saw that Nye Tian was already safe, her entire person suddenly trembled, the massive ocular power instantly disappearing. Her complexion was deathly pale like paper, fresh blood continuously flowing out of her eyes, her entire person feeble to the extreme. Her figure moved, landing on the ground, swaying a bit, almost unable to stand. She had already reached her limit, and couldn't help Nye Tian anymore. Chapter 1007. Nye Tian stood high up in the sky, his whole body filled with terrifying blood qi and sharp sword intent. At this moment, his sword principal realm had broken through to the sword soul realm, which was enough for him to use the final move of the forbidden move of the AO sword tactics, blood devouring the sky. Humph! The great elder looked at Nye Tian's figure, and felt the sword intent released by the blood-red sword shadow, but the corner of his mouth raised into a disdainful smile. Even if Nye Tian ignited his blood qi and used the forbidden move, he would never believe that the former had the ability to hurt him. The power of a martial artist at the peak of the Heaven Emperor stage was not something an ant in the 9th tier of the Heaven realm could imagine. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the sky, the sword intent and blood qi around Nye Tian became more and more intense, and ear-piercing whistling sounds could be heard constantly, as if the space was about to be torn apart. Kill! In the next moment, Nye Tian let out a furious roar, and the sword intent and blood aura around him instantly converged into the blood-colored sword shadow. In the void, a huge sword that seemed to be condensed from blood appeared. It was thousands of meters long, and it was rolling about. Boom! The blood-red giant sword suddenly slashed down, leaving a glaring blood-red mark in the void. The space was filled with the smell of blood, and the heaven and earth were dyed with blood, as if covered with a layer of blood curtain. Rumble! 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 In the distance, the rocks and trees tens of thousands of meters away could not withstand the pressure of the huge sword intent and collapsed one after another. The heaven and earth were trembling, as if the scene of doomsday had arrived. This! And Huailin gasped, unable to withstand the pressure of the sword intent, and his figure quickly retreated. The layer of ice on the ground cracked inch by inch, as if it was bombarded by a huge force and was about to collapse. Under the impact of the sword intent, the altar of 9 shook violently, as if it was about to be destroyed at any time. Mo Rushi's figure in the altar, completely unable to sense anything outside, but around her, a layer of mysterious power was faintly flowing, slowly released, extremely vast. "Is that all you've got?" The Guardian Grand Elder looked at Nye Tian coldly. There was no fear on his face. Instead, there was contempt. It had to be said that the power displayed by Nye Tian far exceeded his expectations. The power contained in the blood-colored greatsword was enough to instantly kill a first or even second-tier heaven-being martial artist. But sadly, he, Zhou Qing, was 9th-level Heavenly Emperor strength. How could he fear this degree of attack? Zhou Qing, This was the name of the Guardian Grand Elder. However, this name was rarely mentioned. The people of the Guardian family all respectfully addressed him as Great Elder. Boom! Right at this moment, the blood-red sword descended. Its majestic aura covered the entire sky as it pressed down on Zhou Qing's head. Reckless fool! Zhou Qing smirked coldly and casually struck out with his palm. The boundless palm force caused the void to tremble and the stench of blood in the air to dissipate. Rumble! The blood-colored greatsword bombarded onto the enormous handprint but was unable to penetrate it at all. The entire sword body collapsed uncontrollably. Sword intent and blood chi shot out, wreaking havoc in the space. An ant will be an ant. No matter how terrifying the martial technique, it can't stand up to a single blow too. Zhou Qing laughed wildly, completely not taking Nie Tian seriously. Is that so? But right at this time, Nie Tian's figure actually instantly appeared in front of him, less than 100 meters away from him. Courting death. Zhou Qing roared angrily. He did not expect that Nie Tian actually dared to charge straight over. Right at the instant his voice faded, the corners of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a hint of coldness. Following that, his gaze quivered. Boundless stellar power was released. Starlight flickered in the space, turning into a horrifying mental deterrence, enveloping over with a loud bang. Amen. Zhou Qing was suddenly taken aback, feeling that something was amiss. Following that, his soul trembled, his mind instantly losing guard. That sword just now, Nie Tian indeed burned a large amount of blood chi. But this sword of his was not a life-taking sword, but a sword to divert attention. Zhou Qing's strength was peak Heavenly Emperor. Even if Nie Tian completely burned the blood chi in his body, it was also impossible to contend with him. His only chance was to get close to Zhou Qing and use absolute tremor to control the other party. That sword of blood devouring the heavens merely created an opportunity for him to get close to Zhou Qing. The true killing move was at the back. Suddenly unleashing absolute tremor within 100 meters, even Zhou Qing, who had peak Heavenly Emperor strength, also directly got hit. Die! Absolute tremor made Zhou Qing instantly lose guard. Nie Tian did not hesitate at all. The Hellfire Crucible appeared behind him. The astral sacred flame fused into the sword intent. Sword Absolute Heaven Chop suddenly stabbed out. A sword surging with flames rumbled towards Zhou Qing. This was Nie Tian's last chance. After this sword, his essence, energy, blood chi, and stellar power were all reached the limit, practically being exhausted. Bang! A sword shadow flashed past. A muffled sound. Zhou Qing's figure directly flew out backward. A dripping trail of blood appeared in the void. The current Zhou Qing was completely demented. There was no essence energy undulation around him at all. He completely relied on his fleshy body to receive Nie Tian's sword. Zhou Qing's figure was struck until he fell back several thousand meters. Just as he was about to fall, his pair of infatuated eyes actually suddenly flickered. Following that, he sobered up. His figure trembled slightly. Zhou Qing stabilized his figure. A bloody wound on his body instantly healed. Failed. Seeing this scene from far away, Nie Tian's gaze trembled violently. He already unleashed his strength to the limits but still failed to kill Zhou Qing. He did not even seriously injure the latter. The difference in strength between the two of them was too great. It was like heaven and earth. If Nie Tian was a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist, or if Zhou Qing was below 5th level Heavenly Emperor, the latter would be seriously injured even if he did not die at this time. Ah! Zhou Qing's figure froze, a pair of cold eyes staring fixedly at Nie Tian. He actually suddenly started roaring crazily, like a wild beast that went berserk. To think that he, an exalted peak Heavenly Emperor martial artist, the Guardian family's head elder, was actually sent flying by a Deva realm ant and even injured. This was his humiliation, a tremendous humiliation. Zhou Qing felt like there were 10,000 bugs biting him all over his body, making his entire person go crazy. At this time, a trace of mental undulation appeared in the void. It was precisely the myriad devil-dragon head. The entire process, the myriad devil-dragon heads saw it all. The shock in his heart at this moment was indescribable. Nye Tian, a Deva realm martial artist, actually nearly killed the Guardian family's head elder. If not for witnessing it with his own eyes, it was absolutely impossible to believe. The myriad devil-dragon head had always thought that Nye Tian was just a small fry. At this time, he suddenly understood that compared to Nye Tian, he was the one who was a small fry. Everything was too bizarre, exceeding the myriad devil-dragon head's imagination. Nye Tian was a terrifying opponent, horrifying until it made one's hair stand on end. If such a person grew to the heavenly emperor realm, it was simply unimaginable. But Nye Tian was abnormally calm at this moment. The disappointment in his eyes disappeared. His two eyes actually became firm once more, killing intent surging all over his body. Even at this moment, he still did not give up and still wanted to carry on fighting. "Aunt, this elder will exterminate you!" Zhou Qing roared furiously. His figure moved, directly attacking towards Nye Tian. Chapter 1008. Zhou Qing attacked valiantly, his aura surging. Heaven and earth seemed like they were going to collapse under the berserk aura. Nye Tian's eyes were grim, without any fear. His strength was too weak. Facing an opponent far stronger than him, even if he went all out, he still fell short at the last step. That series of attacks just now was already Nye Tian's limit. If Zhou Qing was a martial artist below the 5th level Heavenly Emperor, it was extremely likely that he would already be a corpse at this moment. Unfortunately, Zhou Qing was a peak Heavenly Emperor martial artist. Just by relying on the fleshy body martial physique, he withstood Nye Tian's fatal sword. "Die for me!" A cold, furious roar sounded out, akin to the death god's knell, resounding in the void. "Kill!" Nye Tian's martial physique had already reached the limit. But at this moment, his fighting spirit was still wild. With a furious roar, the aura in his entire body surged up, and Huailin and the myriad demon dragon capital were thoroughly shocked by Nye Tian. Just what kind of tenacious conviction was it to be able to support Nye Tian to never yield? A person like Nye Tian, even when facing the most hopeless situation, still did not lose hope. It was seriously too terrifying. Pointless struggle. Zhou Qing stood high up and spoke coldly. Smacking a palm down, heaven and earth trembled, and the winds and clouds changed color. Nye Tian. When Rui Qinyu saw this scene, even her voice became shrill. Her pupils suddenly constricted. What was released was not ocular power, but fresh blood. Her ocular power was already depleted completely. She could not use the 9-color pupils at all. Nye Tian was completely fearless, releasing all the blood and qi in his body once again, wanting to fight to the death. Boom! Right at this moment, at the juncture of life and death, an explosive rumble suddenly sounded out. The 9 sacrificial altar swayed abruptly. A massive mighty force spread out. The surrounding space stagnated for a moment as if it suddenly stopped. Amen. Everyone was stunned at the same time. They actually felt an omnipresent power descend on them without any warning. "What's going on?" Zhou Qing struck out with his palm, but his figure froze in midair. It was as if time had suddenly stopped, but his brain was still working. The sage body is about to awaken. In Nye Tian's sea of consciousness, the voice of the Sword Elder sounded, with a slight tremble. The body of a sage, the legendary number 1 martial body throughout the ages, was about to be completely awakened. At this moment, the entire heavens and the earth were deathly silent, and it seemed solemn and dignified. In space, a profound and mighty force surged. It was calm and indifferent, yet boundlessly vast, and it filled the heavens and the earth as if it came from the heavens and the earth itself. Everyone's heart was filled with doubt. They had no idea what was going on. However, everyone could feel that the sudden change in the world was definitely related to the 9 altar. To be more precise, it was related to the people inside the altar. Nie Tion's heart was beating wildly. What kind of earth-shattering things would happen if the body of a saint was awakened? Nie Tion felt that at this moment, even time had become strange. It seemed to be very slow, but also like an instant. It was only a moment, but it gave people a feeling that the world had reincarnated and the world had changed. The peaceful and solemn atmosphere between the heavens and the earth lasted for an unknown period of time. The awakening of the sage, the world bows its head. After a long time, a vigorous and distant voice sounded, booming in everyone's ears. It seemed to be a sigh, revealing a decisive indifference. The sigh of the sage. The sword elder's voice suddenly sounded, and he was extremely shocked. He did not expect that Emo Rushi's sage body would be so powerful that when it was awakened, it would trigger the sigh of the sage. The sigh of the sage? Nie Tion was puzzled, but he was even more shocked. The awakening of the sage, the world bows its head. Wasn't this sigh too arrogant? What kind of existence was a sage to dare make the world bow its head? Could it be that a sage could surpass the great Tao of heaven and earth? With this sigh, the heavens and the earth were filled with a peaceful aura, as if the heavens and the earth had a life of its own and were breathing steadily. At this moment, not only the Imperial Advisor's residence, but the entire Ice Snow City, the Snowfield Tundra, the Shumi world, and even the higher-level worlds and even more distant space-time heard this sigh. Everyone's eyes became dazed, and a look of awe appeared on their faces. The power of a sage passed through space, through planes, and was conveyed to everyone's heart. This was a kind of power that went straight to the soul, and it was irresistible. After a very, very long time, that sigh still echoed in the space, as if it had existed for an eternity and would never disappear. At this moment, Emo Rushi stood on the altar, and a layer of mysterious power surged around her. It was like a humanoid shadow, shrouding and protecting her. After an unknown period of time, Emo Rushi's slightly closed eyes suddenly opened, and there was an extremely deep ruthlessness in her eyes. She was indifferent to the world, indifferent to everything, and emotionless. The moment she opened her eyes, the space immediately returned to normal. What's going on? Zhou Qing looked at Emo Rushi in a daze, and he had no idea what had happened. Nie Tion looked at Emo Rushi, but when their eyes met, all he saw was an extremely cold and indifferent look. Moreover, Emo Rushi's expression changed, and her face was completely indifferent and emotionless. Nie Tion frowned slightly, and he suddenly noticed that there was a humanoid shadow around Emo Rushi's body, and it was very strange. The humanoid shadow seemed to be condensed by some kind of extremely mysterious power, and when one's divine sense probed it, it made one's soul tremble. Boom! At this moment, Zhou Qing suddenly reacted, and directly slapped down, intending to kill Nie Tion. Don't kill him! Seeing this scene, Emo Rushi's beautiful eyes flickered, and a trace of emotion suddenly appeared in them. She casually waved her hand, and a terrifying power appeared, as if it came from the void, and directly descended on Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing's eyes suddenly trembled, and he wanted to resist, but there was no way to do so, because the power did not attack him, but directly descended on him. The strange power directly penetrated Zhou Qing's body, and then his body trembled slightly, and his breath of life suddenly stopped, and all his vitality was cut off. Nie Tion suddenly felt that there was no breath of life in Zhou Qing's body, and his eyes involuntarily narrowed slightly, completely unable to believe the scene in front of him. Zhou Qing's body was lying flat in midair, and his face was peaceful and calm. There was not a single wound on his body, and it was no different from before, but there was no breath of life in his body, and he was completely dead. The power that Emo Rushi released did not seem to bring harm to Zhou Qing, but directly removed his breath of life. This kind of power, overbearing and unreasonable, directly deprived a martial artist's breath of life, as if it was a god that ruled over everything. Nie Tian was stunned on the spot, and he was completely unable to accept the scene in front of him. A martial artist at the peak of the Heaven Emperor stage died just like that. He had died quietly and inexplicably. It was as if he had died a wrongful death. Chapter 1009. Nie Tian looked at Emo Rushi, but his expression was very puzzled. The current Emo Rushi's eyes were no longer cold and emotionless, but they recovered their original gentleness and sweetness. Nie Tian immediately discovered that the strange phantom that enveloped Emo Rushi just now already disappeared. That mysterious power also disappeared along with it. Nie Tian, are you alright? Emo Rushi's beautiful eyes flickered, suddenly discovering that Nie Tian was severely injured. She took a step forward and directly came to the latter's side. Nie Tian was stunned. It seemed like Emo Rushi completely did not remember what happened just now. I'm fine. Nie Tian's injuries were extremely severe, but his life was not in danger yet. When his divine sense probed Emo Rushi's body, his expression directly turned stiff. Emo Rushi actually directly broke through to first-level Heavenly Emperor strength. Absorbing the 9 Altar's power and awakening the sage body actually let Emo Rushi break through the plane restrictions and directly reach first-level Heavenly Emperor strength. Amen? Want to escape? Right at this time, Nie Tian's brows furrowed slightly and he cried out in surprise. He suddenly detected a trace of mental undulation appearing in the void. Clearly, it was the myriad devil dragon head wanting to escape. Rumble! Nie Tian had yet to take any action when Emo Rushi suddenly smacked a palm out. A ball of crimson flames flew out like a long snake, directly extinguishing that ball of mental undulation. The myriad devil dragon head's last trace of soul was directly obliterated. Zhou Qing, the myriad devil dragon head, a peak Heavenly Emperor powerhouse, one of the Sumeru 4 peaks, all died in Emo Rushi's hands in the blink of an eye. Emo Rushi cried out in surprise, looking at her palm with a puzzled look. With a look of surprise, she said in astonishment, "Why did my strength suddenly become stronger?" In that instant just now, she practically made a move subconsciously. But she did not expect to directly kill the myriad devil dragon head. What was even stranger was that she felt that her perception ability also became stronger. She could actually even detect subtle mental undulations. Nie Tian had a speechless look. This girl still did not know that she awakened the sage body. It seemed like she did not even know that her strength advanced to Heavenly Emperor realm. Nie Tian, In the next moment, Emo Rushi finally realized something. Her small mouth opened wide, but she was too excited to make a sound. Nie Tian smiled in relief. He was happy for Emo Rushi's improvement. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly glanced at Rui Qianyu. The latter's face was pale and her breathing was very weak. "Rui Qianyu, are you alright?" As soon as Nie Tian landed, he became nervous. He sensed Rui Qianyu's aura and was relieved when he didn't sense any blood-devouring power. "I'm fine." Rui Qianyu nodded. She glanced at Emo Rushi and suppressed the shock in her heart. She never expected that Zhou Qing and the myriad demon dragon's head would die at Emo Rushi's hands in such a dramatic fashion. Rui Qianyu seemed to notice something, but she didn't say anything. After confirming that Rui Qianyu was fine, Nie Tian was finally relieved. This time, it was all thanks to Rui Qianyu. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until Emo Rushi awakened her sage body. Emo Rushi's sage body was too powerful. However, after she killed Zhou Qing, that power seemed to have disappeared inexplicably. It was very strange. Lord Nie Tian, the myriad demon dragon's head is dead, but the Dragon Abyss army is still here. At this moment, an Huailin walked over and cautiously reminded Nie Tian. Nie Tian finally reacted. He was too shocked just now and actually forgot that there was still a battle on the other side. "Rushi, let's go and take a look." Nie Tian smiled faintly and immediately left. In the sky above the Imperial Tutor's residence, the Imperial Guards and the people of Dragon Abyss were still fighting. The people of Dragon Abyss had already gained the upper hand. The ground was littered with the corpses of the Imperial Guards. Qiushan and the others were also doing their best to resist, but it was obvious that their essence force was almost depleted and they wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Rushi, I'll leave these people to you. Nie Tian came to the battlefield and said to Mo Rushi. Although the Dragon Abyss army was strong, it was definitely not a match for Mo Rushi. Mo Rushi had just advanced to the Heavenly Emperor realm, so it was a good time for her to familiarize herself with her new strength. Mo Rushi nodded heavily, a smile on her exquisite face. All this while, Nie Tian was the one protecting her, and she could only watch Nie Tian fight. Now, she finally had the chance to let Nie Tian stand at the side and watch the battle. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He wanted to see how strong Mo Rushi was now. Who? Mo Rushi's figure moved, and a pair of crimson flame wings appeared behind her. Like a phoenix spreading its wings, she directly rushed into the Dragon Abyss army. Mo Rushi flapped her wings in midair, and a flame whizzed out. Immediately, a sea of fire appeared in the sky, and with a cry, a fiery red phoenix swooped down. What is that? What a powerful aura! Run! When the people of Dragon Abyss saw a 1,000-meter-tall fiery phoenix suddenly appear in the sky, they all screamed in horror, and the overwhelming momentum was completely unbearable, as if their bodies were about to be burned. The fiery phoenix rushed down, and the space within tens of thousands of meters directly turned into a sea of fire. The next moment, countless heart-wrenching screams sounded, and the world was completely turned into a sea of fire. Scarlet flames streaked across the sky, leaving behind a bloody arc. When the fiery phoenix disappeared, more than half of the thousands of people of Dragon Abyss had been killed or injured. Just one move directly killed thousands of Celestial Realm warriors. Seeing this scene, the Imperial Guards all gasped, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. How could someone release such a terrifying power? However, they had no idea that the saint's sigh just now was also caused by Mo Rushi. Looking at Mo Rushi from afar, Nie Tian was also quite surprised. Mo Rushi's phoenix flames were very terrifying, and at the moment it seemed like even the starry sky sacred flame couldn't compete with it. Nie Tian knew that this was not Mo Rushi's true strength. If she released all her strength, it would definitely be much more terrifying. Because of Mo Rushi's participation in the battle, the situation immediately changed. The people of Dragon Abyss completely collapsed, and they frantically fled. The Imperial Guard's morale was high, and they all rushed into the sky, chasing after them. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian knew that the outcome of the battle was already decided, and Dragon Abyss would be completely destroyed today. After Mo Rushi killed a few more powerful warriors of Dragon Abyss, she flapped her wings and returned to Nie Tian's side. Seeing that Nie Tian had returned, Qiushan and the others also came over. Qiushan, are you guys okay? Nie Tian saw that Qiushan, Zhou Xiao, and Zhang Chao were all covered in blood, and it was obvious that they were seriously injured. However, the three of them were breathing steadily, and their injuries were not life-threatening. I'm fine. Qiushan nodded and then asked, Where's the 10,000 demon dragon's head? It's already dead. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said calmly, It's really dead. Zhou Xiao and Zhang Chao were both stunned. Although they had already guessed it, they were still shocked when they heard Nie Tian confirm it. Chapter 1010. Zhou Xiao and Zhang Chao could not imagine how Nie Tian could kill the 10,000 demon dragon chief. The latter was a pinnacle powerhouse of the Shumi world. But what they did not know was that Nie Tian had just fought with a pinnacle heavenly emperor. Nie Tian did not say much. He looked at An Huailin and said, I'll leave the matters here to you. Yes. An Huailin nodded respectfully. After truly witnessing Nie Tian's terror, He was already in awe of the latter. He did not dare to disobey. Although Huailin was not strong and was very afraid of death, he did a good job in cleaning up the mess. Nie Tian and the others did not stay any longer and immediately left. Nie Tian and Mo Rushi returned to the room. Rushi, how do you feel now? Nie Tian looked at Mo Rushi and asked with a smile. He still had many doubts in his heart. What was that strange phantom image that enveloped Mo Rushi? What power did she use to kill Zhou Qing, and why did that power mysteriously disappear afterward? I feel great. Mo Rushi smiled proudly. Seeing that Nie Tian was so concerned about her, she was naturally happy. After thinking for a moment, she said, "The power of that altar is amazing. It actually allowed my strength to break through to the heavenly emperor realm." Nie Tian nodded. The Nine-Yin altar was an ancient altar that had absorbed the power of countless sage bones. The power contained in it was simply unimaginable. Mo Rushi had absorbed the power of the altar but had not completely refined it. In the next few years, Mo Rushi's strength would rise very quickly. It was very likely that she would reach the pinnacle heavenly emperor within 5 years. Of course, she had to go to the celestial realm of the heaven realm. If she stayed in the Shumi world, the existence of the planar restriction would greatly suppress her strength. You used to protect me. From now on, let me protect you. Mo Rushi's beautiful eyes looked at Nie Tian and suddenly said. Nie Tian laughed, but his face was full of black lines. What are you laughing at? Mo Rushi pouted and said unhappily, You don't believe me? I believe you. Of course I believe you. Nie Tian nodded and smiled, the corners of his mouth raised slightly. Mo Rushi's current strength was even stronger than ordinary first-level heavenly emperor martial artists. Even if she did not have the strength to protect Nie Tian, she also had the ability to protect herself. Several days later, the Ice Snow City had completely stabilized. The 10,000 demons' dragon abyss had been completely annihilated in the snowy ice field. Over the past few days, Nie Tian had been recuperating while Mo Rushi was in seclusion. Mo Rushi's strength had risen too quickly, and it was a complete leap. Her comprehension of the realm was insufficient, and she was unable to unleash the true power within her body. What she needed the most right now was to comprehend the realm and understand the heaven and earth laws of the heavenly emperor realm. Sword Elder, I have something to ask you. In his room, Nie Tian woke up from his cultivation. He suddenly thought of something, and frowned slightly as he spoke in a deep voice. It's about the Guardian family, right? Sword Elder seemed to have long known that Nie Tian would ask him. He laughed strangely, sighed and said, Guardian family. I didn't expect that it really exists. What faction is this? Nie Tian could not help being even more curious when he saw Sword Elder's reaction. At this time, he already knew that the 10,000 demon dragon chief was a traitor of the Guardian family, and the Guardian family was definitely a more terrifying faction than the 10,000 demon dragon abyss. Nie Tian speculated that the 10,000 demon dragon chief must be an unimportant character in the Guardian family. Otherwise, it would not betray. A mere 10,000 demon dragon chief could establish such a huge faction like the 10,000 demon dragon abyss. From this, one could imagine how terrifying the Guardian family was. Zhou Qing had peak heavenly emperor strength, but Nie Tian did not know what kind of position this person had in the Guardian family. He should not be the strongest person. Perhaps the strongest person in the Guardian family was a legendary deity realm martial artist. Guardian family, a faction that only exists in legends. Sword Elder sighed again, as if he had thought of many things. After a long time, he said, I have never seen the Guardian family. I have only heard of this faction. Moreover, you also know the person who created this faction. I know him? Nie Tian was stunned. Since Sword Elder knew about the Guardian family, this faction must be an ancient faction from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Who was the founder? How did Nie Tian know? Could it be However, the next moment, Nye Tian suddenly thought of a person. His expression suddenly changed, and he said a name, Enai Jianming. Yes. Sword Elder nodded and said, "It's the Xian Long Demon Saint." Enai Jianming, the reincarnation of the Xian Long Demon Saint, was an influential figure hundreds of thousands of years ago. As soon as Sword Elder mentioned it, Nye Tian immediately thought of him. "You mean, the Guardian family was created by the Xian Long Demon Saint?" Nye Tian was extremely shocked. He frowned and asked, "Why did he create this faction? What does he protect?" "I don't know." Sword Elder pondered for a long time, but he shook his head and said, "I only heard that the Xian Long Demon Saint gathered 6 mysterious and powerful families to form the Guardian family to protect a very important thing. This thing is related to the survival of this world." Nye Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. Sword Elder's words made him more and more confused. The Xian Long Demon Saint was a peak expert in ancient times. The 6 families that he gathered must be very powerful. Gathering so many powerful people was actually to protect one thing. What could that thing be? Nye Tian couldn't think of what could be related to the survival of this world. Could it be? At this time, Nye Tian suddenly thought of what the 1,000 demon dragon's head had said. The latter mentioned that the 9-star dragon ring was the key to open something. However, he was stopped by Zhou Qing before he could finish his sentence. Could it be that the thing that the 9-star dragon ring could open was the thing that the Guardian family protected? Thinking of this, Nye Tian felt a roar in his head. His whole head was so big that he couldn't think straight. Maybe, Sword Elder guessed what Nye Tian was thinking. He pondered and said, "Maybe the spirit dragon royal ring on your hand is related to the thing that the Guardian family protected." Yes. Nye Tian became cold and nodded. He was more and more convinced of his guess. No wonder the 1,000 demon dragons Abyss and the Guardian family wanted his spirit dragon royal ring. It turned out that there was such a big secret behind it. "Sword Elder, do you know where the Guardian family is?" After a while, Nye Tian completely calmed down and asked in a deep voice. If the Guardian family was in the divine realm of the Heaven Realm, Nye Tian must find them. Since Zhou Qing was able to cross planes and descend into the Shumi world, it was very likely that the Guardian family was in the divine realm of the Heaven Realm. Chapter 10-11. Alternate space? In the room, Nye Tian was stunned. He could not understand what it meant. Alternate space is a special space that floats outside of parallel space. It is usually isolated from parallel space. The Sword Elder explained, but Nye Tian was even more confused because he did not know what a parallel space was. The Sword Elder was slightly speechless and said, "The 3,000 small worlds that we are in, the Shumi world, the Heavenly Realm, and so on are all parallel spaces. Outside of these spaces, there is a special kind of space that exists, and that is a different space." Nye Tian nodded subconsciously, but he still did not understand. You don't need to understand what the alternate space is. You just need to know that you can't reach there now, the Sword Elder said impatiently. He was too lazy to explain too much to Nye Tian. Nye Tian did not ask any more questions. He was still too weak. Even if he could find the alternate space where the Guardian family was, he would be killed in one move. The Great Elder already had the strength of a peak Heaven Emperor. The strength of the others naturally would not be too weak. Why should I be anxious? As long as I have the Spirit Dragon Emperor ring, maybe the Guardian family will automatically come to me. Nye Tian murmured with a smile, feeling relieved. Nye Tian did not ask about the Guardian family, but he had other doubts in his mind. Sword Elder, what happened when Ru Shi awakened the body of a sage? Why is there a mysterious power in her body? What kind of power is that, to be able to directly kill a peak Heaven Emperor martial artist? Nye Tian said all the questions in his mind. These questions had been bothering him for several days, and he had not had the time to ask. When the Sword Elder heard Nye Tian's question, he let out a long sigh. He did not want to say more to Nyetian, but since the latter had already asked, he could not hide it any more. Nyetian, do you still remember the sage's sigh that I mentioned? The sword elder thought for a while and said solemnly. His eyes were slightly trembling. Yes. Nyetian noticed that the sword elder's expression was not right and could not help but become nervous. Of course, he remembered the sigh of the saint. When the saint awoke, heaven and earth bowed down. How could he forget such a domineering sigh? The saint's sigh. According to the legends, only the strongest saint's body can trigger it. This is the saint's sigh for the future generations. The sword elder's expression was solemn and his eyes were filled with yearning. Nyetian was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that there were strong and weak sage bodies. According to the sword elder, Rushi's sage body was stronger than ordinary sage bodies. However, it should be a good thing that Rushi had the strongest sage body. Why did the sword elder seem worried? Nyetian, you must have noticed that after Rushi awakened her saint body, there is a phantom formed by saint energy outside her body. This phantom is likely to be the legendary Saint Mark. The sword elder continued, his face clearly becoming nervous. What do you mean? Nyetian was even more confused. The saint's imprint is rumored to be a saint's soul imprint that is left on another saint's body by another saint. It represents a kind of deprivation. The sword elder said, his tone becoming nervous. Deprivation. Nyetian was stunned again. Suddenly, he thought of something and his face changed. He suddenly remembered that when Rushi killed Zhou Qing, her method was extremely strange. She did not cause any harm at all, but directly deprived his life force. At this time, Nyetian gradually understood the sword elder's meaning. His face sank and he said, You mean, when Saint Rushi awakened her body, another saint left a saint's imprint on her body in order to deprive her of her power? Yes. The sword elder sighed and nodded. Deprivation? What is it that they want to deprive? Nyetian's eyes were gloomy and his heart was suppressing a terrible anger. Rushi had just awakened her saint body, but another saint wanted to deprive her of her power. What kind of power did they want to deprive her of? The other party was already a saint. Why would they care about Rushi's power? Deprive her of her saint energy. The sword elder's face became even more solemn and he said, After awakening the saint body, the saint energy will be produced in the martial body. This kind of power exists in the saint body. Before a martial artist reaches the saint realm, they cannot use it, but it can be deprived by other saints. I understand. At this time, Nyetian completely understood what was going on. When Rushi awakened her saint body, it alarmed other saints, so someone left a saint's imprint on her body to deprive her of her saint energy. Aren't there no saints in this world? Nyetian was about to lose his mind and he roared angrily. Rushi had finally awakened her saint body, but the power that was stimulated in her body was about to be deprived by others. How could he not be angry? Moreover, saints were terrifying existences. How could they appear in this world? Nyetian, I think that the person who left a saint's imprint on Rushi's body is not a saint. Suddenly, the sword elder's voice trembled slightly, and he said in a deep voice, What do you mean? Nyetian frowned and his brain could not process what was going on. The saint's imprint on Rushi's body is not pure, and it contains a kind of evil energy. The sword elder said in a low voice, So I guess that it should be someone who has mastered the saint's imprint and wants to deprive Rushi's saint energy for his own use. Nyetian's eyes were as gloomy as water, and his face was gloomy. After a while, he said in a deep voice, Sword Elder, can you find out who this person is? It's very difficult. The Sword Elder shook his head and said, When the saint's imprint appeared, I sensed that the person came for a short while and then disappeared. He should be someone from the heaven realm, and his strength is at the peak of the heaven emperor realm. He is only one step away from entering the god realm. It seems that this person wants to deprive Emorushi of her saint energy and break through to the god realm. Someone from the heaven realm? Nia Tian was suddenly stunned, and his expression was extremely stunned. A terrible murderous intent surged in his eyes. What surprised him the most was that the person had appeared before, and he actually did not sense it. In the heaven realm, the strength was at the peak of the heaven emperor realm, and only one step away from entering the god realm. There were only a handful of people who matched this strength, and Nia Tian was very familiar with these people. The heaven realm's 9 emperors could be said to be only one step away from the god realm. As for the other powerhouses, there were also a few who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the 9 emperors. But to be strong enough to kill a powerhouse like Zhou Qing in one move, other than the 9 emperors' supreme Snow Emperor, Nia Tian could not think of a second person. The Snow Emperor, the strongest powerhouse in the heaven realm, was known as the 9 emperors' supreme Snow Emperor. Many people even regarded the Snow Emperor as a demigod, which meant that he was only half a step away from the god realm. Snow Emperor, could it be you? Nia Tian suddenly remembered that the Snow Emperor had a piece of saint's bone in his body, and he was a powerhouse who fused with the saint's bone. But if the Snow Emperor came, he would definitely recognize Nia Tian, and Nia Tian did not have the slightest reaction. Chapter 10-12. In the room, Nia Tian's body trembled slightly, and his face was gloomy. In his previous life in the heaven realm, the Snow Emperor was one of the few seniors that he respected, but if the latter did something like depriving Emorushi of her saint power, then Nia Tian would never let him go. The Snow Empress usually gave off a gentle and kind vibe. Would she really do something like that? Nia Tian could not be sure, but he could not rule it out either. After all, Emorushi's saint power was abnormally powerful, and could help the Snow Emperor break through to the godly state. The godly state, just these 2 words were enough to tempt any peak heaven emperor martial artist. Sword Elder, did you sense any aura from that person? For example, the cold aura, the aura of the saint's bones? Nia Tian asked worriedly. No. The Sword Elder shook his head and said, that person's aura was concealed very well. I did not sense any special aura, but if I see that person again, I will definitely be able to recognize him. All right. Nia Tian nodded heavily. He was going to the heaven realm soon anyway. If that person was really the Snow Emperor, Nia Tian would definitely not be merciful. Nia Tian. At this time, the Sword Elder's eyes flickered again. He frowned and said, there is one more thing I have to tell you. What is it? Nia Tian was slightly nervous. The saint's mark on Emorushi's body is not that simple. The Sword Elder let out a long sigh, the corner of his eyes twitched and said, this saint's mark contains a kind of evil power. Not only can it absorb saint power, but it can also absorb her life force. Absorb life force? Nia Tian's eyes trembled, and he asked, what does that mean? Emorushi's life force will be taken away by that person through the saint's mark, she. The Sword Elder said, but he hesitated, thought for a long time, and then said, she will age very quickly. Nia Tian's expression became stiff, his body trembled, and he almost could not stand. Life force, Emorushi's life force was actually taken away. The mark of a saint was actually so evil. Not only did it deprive him of his power, it even deprived him of his life force. Bastard! After a long time, Nia Tian roared furiously. If he found out who the person who left the saint's mark on his back was, he would definitely tear that person into pieces and grind his bones into ashes. Phew! Who? Whoosh! Nia Tian took 3 deep breaths and forced himself to calm down. He said, Sword Elder, how much longer does Rushi have? I'm not sure. The Sword Elder's expression was dignified as he said, judging by the aura of the saint's imprint, it will take at least 1 year, and at most 5 years. This. Nia Tian was dumbfounded. He was petrified. He originally thought that after Emorushi absorbed the altar's power, she would be able to reach peak Heavenly Emperor within 5 years. But now, Emorushi only had 5 more years to live. With Emorushi's strength, she was already a first-level heavenly emperor. Her normal lifespan should be 900 years, even 1,000 years. But because of the existence of the Saint's Mark, her lifespan was actually shortened to 1 year, weakening by a full 1,000 times. Currently, 1 year of Emorushi's life was equivalent to 3 years for others. At this rate, in less than a few months, Emorushi would turn into an old and frail appearance. This was absolutely a fatal blow to a girl. Even if Nye Tian did not care, Emorushi would definitely care too. Saint's Mark, what an evil Saint's Mark! Nye Tian's body trembled, all the anger in his body suppressed in his chest, making his entire person go crazy. Oh no! At this time, Nye Tian suddenly thought that Emorushi had been cultivating in closed seclusion these few days. When she ended her closed seclusion, if she discovered that he already had a face full of wrinkles, what kind of expression would she have? Nye Tian. The Sword Elder guessed what Nye Tian was thinking and said, "The Saint's Mark hasn't flared up yet." "Then when will it flare up?" Nye Tian nervously asked. "The Saint's Mark lurks for 3 months. After 3 months, the Saint's Mark in Emorushi's body will flare up," the Sword Elder said in a deep voice. 3 months! Nye Tian exclaimed, and his heart let out a long sigh of relief. At this time, he had an idea in his mind. Should he imprison Emorushi in the forbidden ice and snow stone? This was the snow domain ice field. It should be easy to find the forbidden ice and snow stone. "It's impossible." The Sword Elder once again guessed what Nye Tian was thinking, and said, "The forbidden ice and snow stone's barren forbidden power cannot imprison the body of a saint." This! Nye Tian was stunned, his fists slightly clenched, and his eyes flashed with terrible anger. "Nye Tian, no matter how angry you are now, it's useless. You must find a way to suppress the Saint's Mark." The Sword Elder calmed down a lot and said with a frown, "Suppress." Nye Tian was stunned, and his eyes flashed with a touch of passion, and said, "The Saint's Mark can be suppressed? How can it be suppressed?" He didn't expect that such a powerful Saint's Mark could be suppressed. The Saint's Mark deprives the Saint's power and vitality. We can't stop the Mark from depriving the Saint's power, but we can stop the Mark from depriving the vitality. The Sword Elder pondered and said, "As long as we use something with a strong vitality, it can suppress the Saint's Mark to a certain extent." Something with a strong vitality. Nye Tian's eyes flashed, and he said, "1,000 leaves indigo, purple sky crow, 10,000-year purple ginseng, are these enough?" What he mentioned were all rank 9 spiritual materials, and their vitality was very strong. The vitality of a rank 9 spiritual material can be suppressed, but it won't last long. A rank 9 spiritual material can suppress the Saint's Mark for a day. The Sword Elder nodded and said, "A day?" Nye Tian was stunned, and he was completely speechless. The power of the Saint's Mark was too strong. A rank 9 spiritual material could only suppress it for a day. Didn't this mean that Emorushi had to consume a rank 9 spiritual material every day? One must know that rank 9 spiritual materials were very precious treasures of heaven and earth. Not to mention the Shumi world, even in the heaven realm's divine realm, they were rarely seen. Even if Nye Tian entered the heaven realm's divine realm, it would be impossible for him to find so many rank 9 spiritual materials. Sword Elder, Rushi has the Nirvana Saint heart in her body, which has a strong suppression on the Saint's Mark, right? Nye Tian suddenly thought of the Nirvana Saint heart, and he exclaimed with a hint of surprise on his face, "I have already taken into account the suppression of the Nirvana Saint heart. Without the Nirvana Saint heart, Emorushi would only have a few months to live." The Sword Elder sighed and shook his head. Nye Tian was stunned again, and he couldn't react for a long time. The power of deprivation of the Saint's Mark was too strong, and even the Nirvana Saint heart couldn't resist it. "There are still 3 months, I have to leave here immediately." After thinking for a while, Nie Tian prepared to leave the snowy ice field immediately. He made a decision in his heart to immediately return to the Shumi world and head to the Holy Light Empire. No matter what, he had to find Li Yi first. If he was lucky, he might be able to get some rank 9 spiritual materials. Nie Tian. At this moment, a voice sounded outside the room. Chapter 10:13. Nie Tian was about to leave the room when Rui Qianyu's voice rang out, causing his heart to sink. Previously, Rui Qianyu was severely injured in order to protect Mo Rushi. At that time, Nie Tian saw that she was fine, so he did not pay much attention to it. Now that Rui Qianyu suddenly appeared, could something have happened to her? Nie Tian. Seeing Nie Tian walk out, Rui Qianyu forced a smile, but then her face turned slightly solemn, as if something bad had happened. Is the blood-devouring power in your body again? Nie Tian saw Rui Qianyu's hesitant look, and immediately became nervous. No. Before Nie Tian could finish, Rui Qianyu interrupted him and said, I'm fine, but Mo Rushi might be in trouble. Rushi? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he was stunned. Rui Qianyu took a deep breath and said, previously at the altar, after she absorbed the altar's power and killed that heavenly emperor martial artist, I felt a very terrifying power in her body. It seemed to be some kind of curse power. You felt it? Hearing Rui Qianyu's words, Nie Tian breathed a sigh of relief, but his face was slightly solemn, and he said, I already know about this, thank you for reminding me. The terrifying curse power that Rui Qianyu mentioned was obviously the sage brand. It seemed that when they were at the altar, both the Sword Elder and Rui Qianyu had sensed it, only Nie Tian had not. Nie Tian's mental strength had already reached the 89th stage, and coupled with the mysterious cauldron divine inscription, his perception should not be lower than Rui Qianyu's. Why was it that Nie Tian could not sense the sage brand, but Rui Qianyu could? It was a little strange. Nie Tian, the power of the curse seal is extremely terrifying. I'm worried that Mo Rushi's life will be in danger. Rui Qianyu hesitated for a moment before she finally voiced out her concern. Nie Tian was slightly stunned. It seemed that Rui Qianyu was very sensitive to the sage's imprint. Rui Qianyu hesitated again. Her face was a little embarrassed as she said in a deep voice, the aura of that curse seal is very similar to the blood-devouring power in my body. It can devour a martial artist's blood chi. I think that when I activated the altar, I unintentionally transferred the power of the blood devour to Mo Rushi. At this point, Rui Qianyu looked very guilty and blamed herself. It has nothing to do with you. Nie Tian bitterly smiled and said, I already know where the seal on Rushi's body came from. It's not because of the blood-devouring power in your body. At this moment, Nie Tian finally understood why Rui Qianyu looked so embarrassed. It turned out that she had this worry in her heart. In fact, it was no wonder that she would think that way. Mo Rushi's body had an additional power that could devour blood chi, and the blood devour power in her body had mysteriously disappeared. Naturally, she would have this concern. Of course, Nie Tian knew that Rui Qianyu's blood devour power did not disappear, but it was suppressed by the desolate cold energy. Moreover, if she continued to awaken the 9 color pupils, a new blood devour power would appear. It really has nothing to do with me? Rui Qianyu was puzzled. She was worried that Nie Tian was saying this on purpose to comfort her. It really has nothing to do with you. Nie Tian forced a smile and suddenly realized that Rui Qianyu had become stronger. He said in astonishment, You've broken through to the Heavenly Emperor stage. Yes. Rui Qianyu nodded slightly and said, I just broke through not long ago. Then Rui Qianyu asked, Can you break the seal in Mo Rushi's body? Is there anything you need me to do? Nie Tian's expression became solemn. He let out a long sigh and did not hide anything. He told her about Mo Rushi's situation. What an evil seal power! It can directly rob a martial artist of their life force. Rui Qianyu frowned in anger. The Saint's seal in Emo Rushi's body was a power that was even more terrifying than her blood-devour power. The person who placed the Saint's seal on Emo Rushi was too evil. Nie Tian let out a long breath. His face was green and red. As long as he could find the person behind the Saint's seal, he would definitely kill that person. To suppress the Saint's seal in Emo Rushi's body, you will need a large amount of 9th-grade spiritual materials, right? Rui Qinyu calmed down and suddenly asked. Yes. Nie Tian nodded helplessly. 9th-grade spiritual materials were very rare even in the Heaven Realm's divine realm. But after 3 months, Emo Rushi would need to expend a stock of 9th-grade spiritual material every day. Where was he going to get so many 9th-grade spiritual materials? I will do my best to search for 9th-grade spiritual materials, Rui Qinyu said abruptly. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment but did not pay too much attention to it. Following that, Rui Qinyu directly bade farewell to Nie Tian. She wanted to head deeper into the sub-zero icy field. Nie Tian did not know why Rui Qinyu wanted to go deeper into the sub-zero icy field, but the latter seemed to be very determined. He was worried about Emo Rushi's matter in his heart, so he did not ask. The current Rui Qinyu was already first-level Heavenly Emperor strength. Even if Nie Tian had a life-and-death battle with her, the outcome was still unknown. In the Sumer world, even powerhouses at the level of the Sumer Fourth Peak were not Rui Qinyu's opponent. Therefore, Nie Tian did not need to worry about Rui Qinyu's safety anymore. The reason why Rui Qinyu wanted to go deeper into the sub-zero icy fields was because she had an inexplicable intuition in her heart that there was something waiting for her in the depths of the icy field. After fusing with the barren inheritance, Rui Qinyu felt that she had gained some fragmented memories. It was precisely these memories that drove her to go deeper into the icy field. Rui Qinyu did not delay and left immediately. Rui Qinyu, I hope you can be happy. Looking at the figure gradually disappearing in the sky, Nie Tian sighed softly. For some reason, Rui Qinyu's departure made him feel inexplicably a little disappointed. It's time for me to leave too, Nie Tian murmured. Without wasting any more time, he immediately went to find Emo Rushi, Qiu Shan, and the others. Half an hour later, Nie Tian and the others packed up and left the sub-zero icy field. Before leaving, Nie Tian specifically bid farewell to Huailin. He had promised the latter that he would make Huailin the icy field's lord, and that he would find a way to help Huailin ascend to the Heavenly Emperor realm. Now, it seemed that the latter promise would have to be fulfilled a little later. Huailin, on the other hand, did not think much of it. In any case, he had been stuck at the Heaven Realm for more than 200 years, so a little more time would not make much of a difference. Moreover, ascending to the Heavenly Emperor realm was an extravagant hope for him. How could he expect it to be realized in a day? After leaving the sub-zero icy fields, Nie Tian and the others only took a few days to return to Fire Beacon Border City. Zhou Xiao and Zhang Chao stayed at Fire Beacon Border City, while Nie Tian, Emo Rushi, and Qiu Shan headed straight for Holy Light Imperial City. Along the way, Nie Tian did not stop, traveling day and night. 3 days later, the trio finally arrived at Holy Light Imperial City. What a majestic capital city! Qiu Shan gazed at the Holy Light Imperial City in front of him, and could not help but exclaim. The capital city in front of them was countless times more majestic than the cities in the 3,000 lesser world. Chapter 10:14. Holy Light Imperial City, the capital city of the Holy Light Empire, was the most prosperous city in the entire Holy Light region. The entire city spanned thousands of miles, and the outermost city walls were hundreds of meters tall. They were built with black sand and stones, and were protected by a Grade 7 spiritual formation. It was rumored that they could withstand the attack of a Heavenly Emperor powerhouse. Is this Holy Light Imperial City? Are Ninth Sister and the others in the city? Emo Rushi's beautiful eyes twinkled, looking very happy. Of course, Nye Tian did not tell her about the sage brand, because it would only add to Emorushi's worries, and it would not help at all. Ninth sister, I haven't seen you for more than a year. I wonder how you are now. Nye Tian murmured, a cute little face appearing in his mind. Nye Yuro had been back to the Holy Light Empire for more than a year, and Nye Tian was very curious to know how strong Nye Yuro was now. Nye Yuro was a dual-element spirit of light and wind, and she had awakened the 1,000-gem illusory seal. Cultivating with the Holy Light Patriarch, her strength was definitely not low. And Qiu Linger, he wondered how she was now. Nye Tian and the others did not wait any longer, and immediately entered Holy Light Imperial City. Holy Light Imperial City was indeed the most prosperous city in the Holy Light region. The moment Nye Tian and the others entered, they could feel the liveliness and clamor. Nye Tian, this is my first time in such a big city. Let's play for a few days first, okay? Emorushi looked at the noisy crowd around her, and was very excited, like a curious little girl, constantly looking around. Okay. Seeing Emorushi so happy, Nye Tian nodded slightly. He wanted to familiarize himself with Holy Light Imperial City first, and at the same time ask about Li Yi. Holy Light Imperial City was very vast, and could even be called vast. The entire Imperial City was divided into 3 inner and 3 outer layers, a total of 6 regions. The central region was called the First Inner City, and the palace was located in the First Inner City, followed by the Second Inner City, the Third Inner City, then the First Outer City, the Second Outer City, and the Third Outer City. Nye Tian and the others spent most of the day, and finally passed through the 3 outer cities and entered the Inner City. The Inner City was more prosperous and crowded than the Outer City. The streets were filled with people. Nye Tian asked around and found out that the largest marketplace in Holy Light Imperial City was in the Second Inner City. Therefore, he did not stay in the Third Inner City and headed straight for the Second Inner City. He wanted to try his luck. Perhaps he would be able to find a 9th-grade spirit material or some other good stuff in the market. A short while later, Nye Tian and the others appeared on the streets of the Second Inner City and soon arrived at the market. There were even more people here, and it was simply a squeeze. Both sides of the street were lined with shops. There were spirit weapon shops, spirit pill pavilions, spirit array trading centers, and everything else. Nye Tian even saw a lot of 5th and 6th rank spirit weapons being sold on the street stalls. Wow! This flower is so beautiful! At this time, Emorushi's gaze fell on a scarlet flower, and she couldn't help but exclaim. Nye Tian shook his head with a smile. This is a rank 7 spirit herb, red Rakshasa. It's extremely poisonous. Emorushi nodded her little head, but there was still a hint of reluctance in her eyes. If it wasn't poisonous, she would definitely buy it. Nye Tian looked at Emorushi speechlessly. It was hard to imagine that this girlish girl was actually a heavenly emperor powerhouse. After accompanying Emorushi for a while, Nye Tian was ready to leave. He hadn't found what he was looking for, so he didn't want to waste any more time. At this time, his gaze suddenly fell on a stall. More accurately, he was attracted by a pile of red seeds. It was a pile of brightly red seeds. Each seed was the size of a thumb and emitted an extremely strong aura of life. It was this strong aura of life that attracted Nye Tian. Looking at the pile of red seeds, Nye Tian's expression slowly changed. His eyes were burning with passion, and 2 words appeared in his mind. Illusion Blood Lotus. That's right, it was a 9th-grade divine flower, Illusion Blood Lotus. In his previous life, Nye Tian had personally planted the Illusion Blood Lotus, and in this life, he had also seen the Illusion Blood Lotus. The demonic fire Doomsday Flame had once used the Illusion Blood Lotus to form a physical body. Legend had it that the Illusion Blood Lotus was a divine flower that existed at the beginning of the world, and its vitality was unimaginable. One had to know that the doomsday flame was able to form a physical body with an illusion blood lotus that was contaminated by evil energy. One could imagine how strong the illusion blood lotus vitality was. Master, this is... At this time, the corpse demon king also recognized it and exclaimed, I know. Nie Tian nodded and forcefully suppressed the ecstasy and shock in his heart. He looked at the stall owner and asked, Stall owner, how much are these flower seeds? The stall owner was a white-haired old man. He looked up at Nie Tian and said coldly, Not for sale. Not selling? Nie Tian was stunned. He didn't expect the old man to reject him directly. After thinking for a while, Nie Tian said, Old man, since you don't want to sell these seeds, why are you putting them on display? I want to put them on display. It's none of your business. The old man said stiffly. You. Seeing the old man being so rude, Qiu Shan took a step forward and was about to lose his temper, but was stopped by Nie Tian. This was the market, and since the old man wasn't willing to sell them, Nie Tian couldn't force him to buy them. Otherwise, he would become a robber. Nie Tian, since he doesn't want to sell them, let's go. It's just a bunch of stupid seeds, who wants them? Emo Rushi pulled Nie Tian's arm and was about to leave. A bunch of stupid seeds? However, at this time, the old man suddenly stood up and shouted, Little girl, do you know what these seeds are? They are the seeds of the 9th grade divine flower illusion blood lotus, the most magical flower in the world. The flowers and leaves of the illusion blood lotus contain a terrifying life force that can revive the dead. As the old man's excited voice faded, mocking laughter rang out from the surroundings. This Li Guijiang is crazy again. They are obviously a bunch of stupid seeds that can't bloom, but he insists that they are the 9th grade divine flower and the most magical flower in the world. He's really bragging. Yeah, this old man is crazy. He doesn't want to sell those stupid seeds, but he still wants to put them on display to scare people. Isn't he cheating people? Sigh, Li Guijiang has been setting up his stall for so many years, rain or shine, but I don't see him selling anything. What do you think he's after? The surrounding people seemed to be very familiar with this old man called Li Guijiang, and their attitudes were obviously very disgusted. I'm telling the truth. Li Guijiang stared at the crowd with his murky eyes and almost roared. He scolded, You are all idiots. The seeds of the illusion blood lotus are priceless treasures. If they are bought by someone who doesn't know what's good for them, it's the same as destroying these seeds. The crowd looked at the almost crazy Li Guijiang and burst into laughter, completely treating him as a lunatic. I believe you. At this time, a calm voice sounded. Although it wasn't loud, it directly interrupted the crowd's laughter. Chapter 10-15. Nie Tian's sudden words caused the laughing crowd to instantly quiet down. Everyone looked at him in disbelief. Their expressions seemed to be saying, Is this guy a fool? You believe me? Li Guijiang was also stunned. It took him a long time to react. He looked at Nie Tian in a daze. His whole body became radiant, and his originally cloudy eyes became passionate. He had been running a street stall for so many years, and everyone around him treated him as a lunatic. Suddenly, someone came out and believed his word. The excitement he felt was indescribable. I believe you. These seeds are indeed the seeds of the illusory blood lotus, Nie Tian said with a nod. He was also very surprised. The old man in front of him had an ordinary appearance, and his strength was not high. He was barely at the true energy realm, but he actually recognized the illusory blood lotus. This was very strange. The illusory blood lotus was a rank 9 divine flower. It was much more precious and rare than ordinary rank 9 spiritual materials. Even in the god realm of the heaven world, very few people knew about the illusory blood lotus. This old man did not have anything special about him, but he actually recognized the illusory blood lotus. The moment Nie Tian spoke, the crowd burst into laughter again. F***ck. Today is really a rare day. A lunatic met a fool. Both of them are weirdos. Yes, yes. This silver-haired kid looks quite smart. He actually believed Li Guijiang's nonsense. You really can't judge a book by its cover. Sigh. There are all kinds of birds in the forest. I have never seen such a foolish person. The surrounding crowd burst into laughter. Their faces were full of mockery. They completely regarded Nie Tian as a fool. Li Guijiang was a lunatic. If Nie Tian believed his words, what else could he be if not a fool? However, Nie Tian did not care at all. With his current strength, he did not care about other people's opinions. As long as he could obtain the illusory blood lotus seeds, he did not mind being a fool for a while. Kid, do you really believe me? Li Guijiang looked at Nie Tian with a stunned expression. He still did not believe him. Name a price. I'll accept any price, Nie Tian said calmly. Earlier, the other party had said that the reason why he was unwilling to sell the blood lotus seeds was because he was afraid that they would be bought by someone who did not know what they were. Now that he knew that they were the seeds of the fantasy flower blood lotus, he should be able to sell them. Crazy. This person is crazy. When the crowd heard Nie Tian's words, they exclaimed again. For a bunch of lousy seeds, he actually said that he would accept any price. If this wasn't madness, then what was? Qiu Shan and Mo Rushi were also taken aback, not understanding what Nie Tian was doing. Li Guijiang's turbid eyes flickered incessantly. After a long while, he finally calmed down and said, Young man, since you know that this is the seed of the illusion flower blood lotus, then you should know its value. No matter what condition I offers, it won't be excessive. The crowd was stunned once again, and they looked at Li Guijiang with disdain. This old fellow was simply too shameless. He had encountered a fool, and now he was demanding an exorbitant price. Yeah. Nie Tian nodded slightly, his face expressionless, without the slightest ripple of emotion. The illusion flower blood lotus was extremely precious, especially to him, as it concerned Mo Rushi's life. I want you. Li Guijiang stared at Nie Tian with a scorching gaze and said in a deep voice. Restless old man, you're courting death. Just then, a roar suddenly sounded, directly interrupting Li Guijiang. Almost at the same time, Nie Tian frowned. A violent force broke through the air and actually blasted towards him. A cold chill bloomed, and a wave of murderous intent rushed towards him. Nie Tian's body trembled slightly, and a majestic sword intent was released, dispersing the cold force. Who are you? Immediately, Nie Tian turned around and looked at the person who had attacked, his eyes gloomy. It was a middle-aged man in a black robe. His chi was very strong, and he was actually in the 5th layer of the sky-human realm. There was a cold smile at the corner of his mouth. However, that was not the main point. What surprised Nie Tian the most was that the man was wearing a black robe, which was the robe of an alchemist. On the badge on his chest, there were 8 golden marks, which meant that he was an 8th-grade alchemist. Master Tang. The crowd was stunned at first, and when they saw the face of the man, they were even more shocked. They all exclaimed in awe and respect. Nie Tian was surprised. This man was indeed an alchemist, and he had a very high status. Otherwise, the crowd wouldn't be so shocked. The man's name was Tang Haifeng, an elder of the Alchemy Association. He had a very high status, and even the Holy Light Emperor had to be respectful to him. Tang Haifeng, even you have become Yunhan's lackey? Li Guijiang looked at the man in front of him and cursed. Shut up. Tang Haifeng's aura surged as he yelled, Old man, do you think you can still be alive without me? You. Li Guijiang was so angry that his body trembled, and he almost fell to the ground. Nie Tian was puzzled as he watched from the side. It was obvious that Li Guijiang and Tang Haifeng knew each other, and there seemed to be a deep grudge between them. At this time, Tang Haifeng glanced at Nie Tian coldly. When he sensed Nie Tian's strength, his eyes suddenly trembled. He had never expected that the silver-haired young man in front of him was in the 9th layer of the sky-human realm. No wonder he could withstand his attack so easily. Judging from Nye Tian's age, he was only in his 20s, but he was already in the 9th layer of the sky-human realm. His talent in martial arts was unimaginable. Then, Tang Haifeng glanced at Qiu Shan and Emo Rushi, and he was even more surprised. He sensed that Qiu Shan was in the 7th layer of the sky-human realm, and his aura was much stronger than that of other martial artists at the same level. Emo Rushi's strength was even more mysterious. Tang Haifeng couldn't sense her strength with his mental strength. Tang Haifeng was an 8th-stage alchemist, and his mental strength was as high as the 82nd stage. There were only 2 reasons why he couldn't sense Emo Rushi's strength. One was that Emo Rushi was too strong and had reached the Heaven Emperor realm, and the other was that Emo Rushi had some means to hide her strength. He was sure that Emo Rushi had some special means to hide her strength. In his opinion, Emo Rushi couldn't have reached the Heaven Emperor realm. After thinking for a while, Tang Haifeng looked at Nye Tian and said in a cold tone, "I'm not selling his things. You can leave now." "Not selling?" Nye Tian smiled and said calmly, "It's between me and him whether to sell his things or not. It has nothing to do with you, right?" Tang Haifeng suddenly appeared, attacked Nye Tian, and then said coldly that he was not selling his things, as if everything here was decided by him, which made Nye Tian very unhappy. "Boy, do you know who I am?" Tang Haifeng frowned and straightened his body, making the alchemist badge on his chest more conspicuous. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched slightly, and he found it very funny. Chapter 10:16. When the crowd saw that Tang Haifeng was infuriated, their eyes lit up, as if they couldn't wait to watch a good show. Tang Haifeng was an 8th-stage alchemist with a high status. Nye Tian was courting death by offending him. "You're just an 8th-stage alchemist. What's there to be arrogant about?" Nye Tian looked at Tang Haifeng with a cold smile. His eyes were full of disdain. His indifferent voice was like a clap of thunder that bombarded everyone's heart. In everyone's hearts, an 8th-tier alchemist was a supreme existence, but Nye Tian did not put him in his eyes at all, and had a very contemptuous attitude. "Lunatic, this silver-haired kid is definitely a lunatic." Countless people screamed in their hearts as they looked at Nye Tian strangely. Looking down on an 8th-tier alchemist in public, this kind of thing, only a madman would do it. "Kid, do you know who you're talking to?" Tang Haifeng was stunned for a long time before he reacted. He felt that he had met a foolish kid who probably didn't even know what an alchemist was. "Get lost!" Nye Tian suddenly stepped forward and released a strong aura that pressed down on Tang Haifeng. Bang! With a muffled sound, Tang Haifeng couldn't bear the pressure of the aura. His body swayed and he collapsed to the ground. Everyone was completely dumbfounded by the scene in front of them. They had no idea what was going on. Nye Tian suddenly attacked because he couldn't stand Tang Haifeng's stupidity and didn't want to waste any more time on him. In fact, if he wanted to, Tang Haifeng would have been a corpse by now. However, he felt that it would be a pity to kill an 8th-stage alchemist just like that. Moreover, they were in Holy Light Imperial City. Killing an 8th-stage alchemist in public would definitely cause some trouble. With that thought in mind, Nye Tian didn't kill Tang Haifeng. Tang Haifeng lay on the ground with a dumbfounded look in his eyes. He didn't expect Nye Tian to really attack him. He knew that Nye Tian was stronger than him, but he was an 8th-grade alchemist. Behind him was the Alchemist Guild and the Holy Light Empire. Could it be that he didn't care about these forces? "Piss off!" Nye Tianling gave Tang Haifeng a cold glance. Even though the Apothecary Guild and Holy Light Empire were powerful, Nye Tian couldn't care less about them. Tang Haifeng struggled to get up. His eyes were shining with vicious light. He gnashed his teeth and said, "Boy, you hurt me in public. This is a public provocation to the Alchemists Guild and the Holy Light Empire." Nye Tian curled his lips and smiled, looking like he didn't care at all. "Old man, you'd better behave yourself. Otherwise, you know the consequences." Tang Haifeng gave Li Guijiang a threatening glance, then turned around and left. When Tang Haifeng disappeared from their sight, the crowd finally realized what had happened. They all turned to look at Nie Tian with shock, awe and fear in their eyes. Li Guijiang also looked at Nie Tian in surprise and couldn't react for a long time. "Old mister, let's continue our transaction." Nie Tian smiled faintly, as if nothing had happened just now. Li Guijiang reacted and said, "Mister, can we talk in private?" "Sure." Nie Tian smiled faintly as if Li Guijiang had something important to tell him. Nie Tian vaguely felt that this transaction would be troublesome. After a while, Li Guijiang left the market with Nie Tian and the others and came to a remote place. Nie Tian looked around. It was very desolate. It was hard to believe that there was such a place in the Holy Light Imperial City. The place where Li Guijiang lived was an abandoned small courtyard. It was very simple. What a strong aura of spiritual materials! Before Nie Tian entered the small courtyard, he sensed an unusually strong aura of spiritual medicine. "Please come in." Li Guijiang nodded slightly and was the first to enter the small courtyard. After entering, Nie Tian was stunned by the scene in front of him. Colorful flowers bloomed all around him. The flowers were in full bloom, and the strong fragrance of flowers filled the air, making people feel as if they were in a sea of flowers. So beautiful! It was the first time Mo Rushi saw such a scene, and she couldn't help but exclaim. Qiu Shan was also stunned and couldn't believe the scene in front of him. Nie Tian felt his mouth go dry. He only calmed down after a long time and looked around greedily. These flowers were very rare spiritual materials. Some were even 7th grade or 8th grade spiritual materials. However, Nie Tian didn't care at all. He looked around one by one, and after looking around, his eyes showed deep disappointment. Although there were many exotic flowers around, none of them were 9th grade. Only 9th grade spiritual materials could suppress Mo Rushi's sage brand, so these exotic flowers were useless to Nie Tian. "You know all these flowers?" Li Guijiang saw all of Nie Tian's reactions. The latter seemed to be very familiar with all the flowers, which surprised him very much. "I know some." Nie Tian nodded. He didn't want to surprise Li Guijiang too much, so he said casually, "Elderly, why did you bring me here? This doesn't seem to have anything to do with our deal, right?" Nie Tian didn't want to waste time and said directly. Li Guijiang frowned and thought for a moment, then said, "Mr. Nie, if you really want the illusory flower blood lotus seed, I only have one condition. Help me get my exotic flower valley back." "The mystic flower valley?" Nie Tian was taken aback and confused. Then, Li Guijiang told him everything. It turned out that Li Guijiang was originally an alchemist, but he didn't have much interest in alchemy. Instead, he was obsessed with growing flowers. In his early years, he obtained an atlas of exotic flowers. After that, he specialized in collecting exotic flowers and studied the method of growing them. Later on, he found a very good place with spirit veins. There, the spirit energy of heaven and earth was abundant, so he cultivated strange flowers there and founded the Strange Flower Valley. In the Exotic Flower Valley, there were all kinds of exotic flowers. However, a few years ago, the president of the Alchemist Guild, Yun Han, wanted to take his exotic flower valley away from him. She wanted to get the method of growing flowers from Li Guijiang. After losing the exotic flower valley, Li Guijiang had been setting up a stall in the marketplace, hoping to meet someone who knew flowers and could help him get the exotic flower valley back. He had to admit that he was very lucky to meet Nie Tian. After listening to Li Guijiang's story, Nie Tian couldn't help but nod with a smile. It was very strange that Li Guijiang would rather grow flowers than become an alchemist. "You seem to know Tang Haifeng, who suddenly appeared today. Who is he?" Nie Tian suddenly thought of what had happened just now and asked. "Alas, my family is so unfortunate," Speaking of Tang Haifeng, Li Guijiang let out a long sigh and said, Tang Haifeng is my disciple and he has always been by my side. A few years ago, in order to join the Alchemist Guild, he told Yun Han about the exotic Flower Valley. Now he is an elder of the Alchemist Guild and Yun Han's disciple. I see. Nie Tian nodded and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 10:17. Mr. Nie, as long as you can help me get back the exotic Flower Valley, I'll give you the seed of the fantasy flower Blood Lotus for free. You can also choose any of the exotic flowers in the valley. Li Guijiang looked at Nie Tian excitedly. He had seen Nie Tian attack Tang Haifeng without any hesitation, so he was sure that Nie Tian had the ability to help him get back the exotic Flower Valley. Nie Tian smiled faintly and looked at Li Guijiang strangely. This guy had a good idea. He wanted Nie Tian to help him get back the exotic Flower Valley and let Nie Tian take any exotic flowers in the valley. It might seem generous, but it was actually very shrewd. If Nie Tian could get back the exotic Flower Valley, why didn't he take it for himself? Why would he give it to Li Guijiang? In this world, the strong were always respected. The big fish ate the small fish. This was the eternal rule. Elderly, I want to know if there are any fantasy flower blood lotuses in the exotic Flower Valley? Nie Tian asked after thinking for a while. He would not help Li Guijiang for free. He must benefit from it. Li Guijiang looked at Nie Tian with a complicated expression. Obviously, he was worried that Nie Tian was also thinking about the exotic Flower Valley. Yes. Li Guijiang finally nodded after thinking for a long time. Yes. Nie Tian's eyes trembled violently. He did not expect that Li Guijiang could really cultivate the fantasy flower Blood Lotus. The exotic Flower Valley is definitely a good place. Nie Tian was pleasantly surprised. The fantasy flower Blood Lotus had high requirements for the environment. The exotic Flower Valley was suitable for the growth of the fantasy flower Blood Lotus. Great! Without hesitation, Nie Tian nodded and said, I'll help you get back the exotic Flower Valley, but I have to change the conditions. What conditions? Li Guijiang was slightly stunned and his eyes became nervous. After I get back the exotic Flower Valley, I can take all the exotic flowers in the valley. As Nie Tian spoke, he suddenly raised his voice, and in the future, I can also take anything from the mystical Flower Valley. Well, Li Guijiang was displeased. If he agreed to Nie Tian's condition, all the exotic flowers he cultivated in the future would be prepared for Nie Tian, and Nie Tian could take them whenever he wanted. Elderly, don't worry. I'm not a greedy person. I will never take anything from the exotic Flower Valley. Nie Tian naturally knew what Li Guijiang was thinking. He said with a smile, Leave the safety of the exotic Flower Valley to me in the future. I promise you that no one will dare to attack the exotic Flower Valley again. And anything you need, I can provide for you. The fact that Li Guijiang was able to cultivate the phantom flower Blood Lotus with just a manual of exotic flowers proved that he truly loved flowers. Perhaps, in the future, Nie Tian would be able to build a world of exotic flowers in the exotic Flower Valley, specializing in cultivating 9th-grade spirit materials. Li Guijiang looked at Nie Tian. The confidence in the latter's eyes made him tremble. Okay, I promise you. In the end, he nodded heavily. He believed that what Nie Tian said was true. That's a deal. Nie Tian smiled slightly. He was very happy. As long as he could take back the exotic Flower Valley, Nie Tian would have endless phantom flower Blood Lotus in the future. Mr. Nie, when are you going to take back the exotic Flower Valley? Li Guijiang's eyes flickered and he asked carefully. There's no time to lose. Now. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth raised confidently, and his face was indifferent. Now. Li Guijiang was stunned. He thought that Nie Tian was joking. The enemy they were going to face was the Alchemist Guild, which was a huge existence. Didn't they need to prepare well? Did Nie Tian want to go to the Alchemist Guild alone and ask for it directly? Li Guijiang had guessed correctly. Nie Tian wanted to go to the Alchemist Guild directly. With his current strength, there was no need for him to beat around the bush. Elder Li, wait here. I'll be back soon. Nie Tian smiled faintly, then looked at Qiu Shan and said, Qiu Shan, stay here with Elder Li. Yes. Qiu Shan answered. Of course, he knew what Nie Tian meant. Obviously, he wanted him to protect Li Guijiang. When Nie Tian beat Tang Haifeng just now, the people from the Alchemist Guild might have already followed them. Rushi, let's go. Nie Tian said to Mo Rushi without hesitation, and the two left directly. Li Guijiang looked at the figures of Nie Tian and Mo Rushi in astonishment, and he couldn't react at all. After leaving the courtyard, Nie Tian and Mo Rushi quickly returned to the street. Nie Tian, are we going to the Alchemist Guild now? Mo Rushi looked at Nie Tian and asked excitedly. Yes. Nie Tian nodded heavily, but his eyes flickered and he suddenly roared, Come out! As his domineering voice fell, a soaring sword intent bloomed in the air. Bang! 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 Immediately, a few muffled sounds came from the air, and several figures appeared and smashed onto the ground. The surrounding crowd was stunned, looking at the scene in front of them dumbfoundedly, not knowing what had happened. You! The people lying on the ground had their chests pierced by the sword intent, and they were bleeding non-stop. They looked at Nie Tian in horror, and they were so shocked that they couldn't speak. They had obviously concealed themselves very well, so how did Nie Tian discover them? Moreover, he only released his sword intent, and all of them were severely injured. These are the martial artists from the Danwu Hall. At this moment, someone recognized the identity of those people and exclaimed. In that instant, the way everyone looked at Nie Tian changed, and fear filled their eyes. The martial artists from the Danwu Hall were from the Alchemist Guild. Someone actually attacked the people from the Danwu Hall in the Holy Light Imperial City. Wasn't this courting death? As expected, it's the people from the Danwu Hall. Nie Tian looked at the people on the ground, smiled faintly, and said, Get up! Bring me to the Alchemist Guild. Since the people from the Alchemist Guild had appeared, Nie Tian couldn't be bothered to find out where the Alchemist Guild was. He just let them lead the way. Those people were stunned, and they seemed to suspect that they had heard wrongly. Injuring the Danwu Hall's martial artists in public, and he even wanted to go to the Alchemist Guild. This person was too arrogant. What? You still want me to make a move? Nie Tianling smiled coldly, and a trace of coldness appeared on his face. Those people were so scared that their faces turned pale. They quickly got up and led the way in front obediently. At the same time, in the hall of the Alchemist Guild, who is so audacious to actually dare to touch the elders of my Alchemist Guild? An angry roar resounded in the hall. The aura was vigorous, and the anger was monstrous. The person who spoke was a white-haired old man. He was tall, and he looked like an enraged lion. This white-haired old man was none other than the president of the Alchemist Guild, Yun Han. He was also the person who snatched away the mystic Flower Valley. Teacher, the person who injured me is a silver-haired youth. His strength is very strong. He's at the 9th level of the Heaven Being Realm. I'm not his match, Tang Haifeng said with fear and trepidation in the hall. His expression was extremely ugly. 9th level of the Heaven Being Realm? Yun Han's gaze trembled slightly, and then his gaze landed on a gray-robed old man not far away. That gray-robed old man's facial features were resolute as if they were carved by a knife. Although he had restrained his aura, he still gave off an extremely strong sense of oppression. Why don't we let him make a move? Yun Han frowned and thought. Chapter 10:18. In the hall of the Alchemist Guild, Yun Han looked at Li Yi and already had a plan. Tang Haifeng wasn't strong, but he wasn't weak either. Since the silver-haired youth could injure him, he must be an expert. There were only 2 people in the entire Alchemist Guild who had the strength of a 9th-level heaven being. One was Yun Han and the other was the Hall Master of the Danwu Hall. However, Yun Han knew his own strength. Although he was in the 9th level heaven being realm, it didn't mean he could compete with an expert like Li Yi. Since Li Yi was one of the 4 peaks of Shumi world, he represented the strongest combat strength in the Shumi world. Let Li Yi deal with this person. He has something to ask of me. Yun Han smiled sinisterly in his heart. His eyes flickered and he said, Lord Li Yi, you already know what happened just now. Someone publicly injured an elder of the Alchemist Guild. This is not only a provocation to the Alchemist Guild, but also the Sacred Light Dynasty. I believe you won't sit back and do nothing, right? Li Yi came to the Alchemist Guild to ask Yun Han to refine some pills for him. It wasn't too much for Yun Han to ask him to solve a small problem. Hearing Yun Han's words, Li Ye's lips twitched and he said indifferently, Don't worry, President Yun. No matter who this person is, I will make him pay for injuring Elder Tang Haifeng. Li Yi understood the conversation between Yun Han and Tang Haifeng very clearly. He guessed that the silver-haired youth that Tang Haifeng mentioned was a young master of a great clan. This was the first time he came to the Sacred Light Imperial City, and he didn't know the rules here, so he injured Tang Haifeng. However, he was puzzled about what kind of youth had the strength of a 9th level heaven being realm. However, Li Yi wasn't worried. With his strength, an ordinary 9th level heaven being realm martial artist couldn't even take one move from him. That's great. Seeing that Li Yi had agreed to help, Yun Han laughed and said, With Lord Li Yi taking action, this arrogant brat will definitely die. Yun Han didn't want the incident in the mystical Flower Valley to be known by everyone. Since Nye Tian dared to make a deal with Li Guijiang, he was courting death. For so many years, Yun Han had occupied the exotic Flower Valley, but she hadn't killed Li Guijiang because she hadn't obtained the exotic flower atlas and the cultivation method of various exotic flowers from him. Tang Haifeng, do you know where that man is? Yun Han sneered at Tang Haifeng. Of course. Tang Haifeng nodded and said with a vicious look in his eyes, I've sent people to follow him. He can't escape. At the same time, Nye Tian's figure had already arrived at the entrance of the Alchemist Guild. At this moment, there were many people gathered in front of the Alchemist Association. When they saw a few elixir martial hall's martial artists covered in fresh blood, they all looked over in astonishment. Someone from the Dan Martial Hall was actually injured by someone? Everyone was puzzled, and their gazes immediately shifted to the silver-haired youth behind them. It seemed like this silver-haired youth was the one who had escorted the people from the Dan Martial Hall over. Sir, it's here. One of them turned around with difficulty and said with a trembling voice. He was very flustered and didn't dare to raise his head to look at Nye Tian. Tang Haifeng, get out here! Nye Tian took a step forward, and his eyes shot out a smear of cold light as he yelled. His voice rumbled like thunder, and everyone present felt their ears buzzing and almost went deaf. Nye Tian knew that after Tang Haifeng was beaten up, he would definitely come to the Alchemist Association, so he directly called out the latter's name. This person was originally Li Guijiang's disciple, but in order to enter the Alchemist Association, he betrayed Li Guijiang. In Nye Tian's life, he hated this kind of disciple who betrayed his master the most. This time, as long as Tang Haifeng had the guts to come out, he definitely wouldn't show any mercy. The rumbling roar reverberated in the air. Everyone's gaze suddenly froze, and the scene instantly became dead silent. Countless pairs of eyes stared at Nye Tian in shock, and their faces were all filled with astonishment. Who would have thought that this silver-haired young man in front of them would actually come to provoke the Alchemist Association? Moreover, it was the most blatant provocation, and he directly asked the Alchemist Association's elder to come out. Is this person crazy? Everyone had a huge question in their mind, and many people were already petrified on the spot. To provoke the Alchemist Guild so brazenly, this person's arrogance was too overboard. Bastard! In the next moment, an angry roar was heard, and the space suddenly trembled. A violent voice was heard. Where did this arrogant person come from? How dare you provoke the Alchemist Association? Boom! As the violent voice fell, a huge palm force whistled through the air, and a huge palm print tore through the air. The huge momentum shook the heaven and earth, and it rolled towards Nyetian. The moment the enormous palm energy appeared, everyone felt their chests tighten, and some people's faces immediately flushed red. What a terrifying palm force! The eyes of the crowd trembled, and cold sweat appeared on their backs. The power of this palm was very strong, and it could definitely kill a level 5 celestial human martial artist. Courting death. The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched, and he spat out 2 words coldly. Subsequently, a surging sword intent soared into the sky, and endless sword light surged and bloomed in the air. Boom! The sword light whizzed out, and a terrifying sword radiance bloomed in the air. That palm force was actually directly devoured, and the figure in the air suddenly froze, and his face revealed an astonished expression. Ah! That person wanted to escape, but it was already too late. He was directly hit by the sword light, and he let out a miserable scream. A glaring trail of blood appeared in the air, and he fell heavily onto the ground, unable to get up. Hiss! When everyone saw this scene, they all gasped, and their expressions were extremely shocked. That person is the Dan Martial Hall's Vice Hall Master. Someone recognized the martial artist who was sent flying by Nyetian's sword and exclaimed, and his expression immediately stiffened. The Dan Martial Hall's Vice Hall Master was an 8th-level celestial human martial artist, but he was actually sent flying by a single sword strike from Nyetian. Furthermore, Nyetian didn't even move from his original spot and didn't even use his sword. He completely defeated his opponent with just his sword intent. This person is so terrifying. Someone reacted and said with a horrified expression, instantly defeating the Dan Martial Hall's Vice Hall Master in one move. Such strength was so terrifying that it made people shudder. At this moment, everyone finally understood why Nyetian dared to provoke the Alchemist Association so arrogantly. So his strength was actually this terrifying. However, what shocked everyone the most was Nyetian's age. He looked to be only around 20 years old, which was too terrifying. Nyetian's talent could no longer be described as monstrous, but a supreme monstrous talent. However, what everyone didn't know was that Nyetian didn't use his full strength in that move just now. Otherwise, that Vice Hall Master's outcome would be that of not even his bones remaining. Nyetian was already at the peak of the 9th-level celestial being realm, and his sword Dao had reached the sword soul realm. A casual sword strike was enough to instantly kill an ordinary 9th-level celestial being martial artist. At this moment, countless black-clothed martial artists appeared in the surrounding air, and they were all Dan Martial Hall's martial artists. However, these people's figures were frozen in the air, and they didn't dare to make a move at all. Their eyes were filled with immense fear. Chapter 10:19. Yun Han and the others heard the commotion outside the hall and immediately walked out. As soon as Tang Haifeng walked out of the hall, he saw Nyetian at first glance. His eyes trembled and he couldn't help but scream. This cry was filled with fear, surprise, and even more so, pleasant surprise. He was frightened because he remembered Nyetian's terrifying strength. He was surprised because he didn't expect Nyetian to actually dare to appear in the Alchemist Guild. He was surprised because he thought that Li Yi would make a move and he would be able to take revenge soon. Tang Haifeng. At this moment, Nyetian suddenly raised his head and locked his stern gaze on Tang Haifeng. His eyes were flickering with cold light. Tang Haifeng felt a bone-piercing chill surging in his heart when he was stared at by Nyetian. His forehead was filled with sweat. Nyetian's eyes were too cold. Being stared at by him made one feel as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. "How dare you!" Yun Han stood beside Tang Haifeng and shouted angrily. A powerful aura rose from his body, as if it was going to rush up to the 9 heavens. No matter what, He was also an expert with the strength of a ninth-level heaven being. Someone came to the Alchemist Guild to make trouble. How could he stand by idly? Meanwhile, Li Yi, who was at the side, had a gloomy expression as if he was thinking about something. He didn't have the intention to make a move. People from the Dan Wu Hall, listen up. This person is openly provoking the Alchemist Guild. Kill him. Yun Han saw many people from the Dan Wu Hall in the sky, and his eyes flashed with coldness as he shouted angrily. The rumbling roar resounded in the sky, but those people in the sky seemed to be frozen. None of them dared to go forward and even kept retreating. Nie Tian's strength was too strong. He could directly injure the Vice Hall Master without using his sword. Even if these people joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for him. When the crowd saw this scene, their eyes trembled. The shock in their hearts couldn't be any greater. What kind of power was this? After one sword, no one in the Alchemist Guild dared to move. Teacher, Tang Haifeng noticed that Nie Tian was still staring at him. His face instantly turned pale, and he was so scared that he couldn't speak. Trash. Yun Han growled. Cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. After that, he turned to look at Li Yi. He was waiting for Li Yi to make a move, but the latter just stood there and watched cold, with no intention of making a move. Brat, who exactly are you? Yun Han calmed down a little. He wasn't sure how strong Nie Tian was, so he didn't dare to attack recklessly. Instead, he roared angrily. You're Yun Han, right? Nie Tian's gaze shifted to Yun Han as he spoke coldly. When the crowd heard Nie Tian call Yun Han by her name, they were all stunned. Yun Han's status in Holy Light Imperial City was very high. Even Holy Light ancestor Li Yi and the others had to respectfully address him as President Yun. Nie Tian was arrogant to this extent. He completely ignored Yun Han's status and called her by her name. So what if I am? Yun Han forcefully suppressed his anger. His expression was ugly, and his eyes were filled with coldness. Very well. Nie Tian laughed eerily and said, Yun Han, listen up. I'll give you a chance to live. 2 conditions. 2. Return the Mystic Flower Valley to its original owner. 2. Destroy your own Yuan meridians and step down as the president of the Alchemists Guild. Nie Tian's voice was calm, but it carried a domineering tone that could not be disobeyed. However, when his words fell into everyone's ears, it was like a shocking bomb had exploded. None of them had expected Nie Tian to make such a statement. Not only did he state 2 conditions, he even said that he would give Yun Han a chance to live. Who was Yun Han? He was the president of the Alchemists Guild, one of the few people with the highest status in the Holy Light region. Nie Tian appeared out of nowhere, wanted to destroy his Yuan meridians, and asked him to step down as the president of the Alchemists Guild. Even Holy Light Ancestor and Li Yi wouldn't dare to say something like that. Nie Tian's domineering attitude was outrageous. He was slapping Yun Han in the face, slapping the Alchemists Guild in the face, and it was a resounding slap. In the next moment, everyone's eyes were on Yun Han, waiting for him to respond. You bastard, you're courting death. Yun Han's expression stiffened for a few seconds. Then, flames of fury burst out of his body, and he let out a vicious roar. His figure blurred into motion as he shot up into the sky and slammed his palm down. An aura as majestic as a mountain rolled out towards Nie Tian. Humph! Facing Yun Han's attack, Nie Tianling snickered with a look of disdain. Since Yun Han was courting death, he could not be blamed for it. Boom! His body shook and a huge sword rolled around Nie Tian. The sword aura shot out thousands of meters away, and the powerful sword aura filled the air. The crowd felt their bodies shake and a huge force pressing down on them. Bang! In the next moment, before anyone could react, there was a muffled sound in the air. Yun Han's body was sent flying and blood splashed in the air. Yun Han landed heavily on the ground, right at Li Ye's feet. His body was covered in blood, but he was not dead. This is so scary. The crowd was completely stupefied by the scene in the sky. Their expressions became blank as they stared at Nie Tian, dumbfounded. The whole area was deathly silent. Although Yun Han was not a cultivator at the 4th peak of the Shumi realm, he was still in the 9th level of the celestial being realm. It was so strange that he was sent flying by Nie Tian's sword so easily. This time, Nie Tian did not use his sword either. He only used his sword will to hurt Yun Han. Who was this silver-haired young man? How could he be so strong? Mo Rushi, who was standing not far from Nie Tian, had a sweet smile on her delicate and pretty face. She liked to see Nie Tian shocking everyone. Nie Tian stood in the same place with a faint smile on his face. His eyes turned and fell on Li Yi, who had been watching the battle. Li Yi, his 8th personal disciple. In fact, the moment Li Yi walked out of the guild hall, Nie Tian had already seen him and recognized him. However, Nie Tian did not show it immediately. He believed that with Li Ye's intelligence, he would definitely be able to guess his identity. Lord Li Yi. Yun Han was lying at Li Ye's feet. He struggled to raise his head and looked at the latter. But at this moment, Li Yi had a silly look on his face. He stared at Nie Tian with his eyes trembling. In the end, even his body began to tremble. What's wrong with Lord Li Yi? Some people in the crowd recognized Li Yi. Seeing the latter's abnormal reaction, they were all surprised and confused. Li Yi was one of the 4 Shumi Peak. His status in the Holy Light domain was comparable to the Holy Light ancestor. He seemed to be very excited in front of Nie Tian, like a child suddenly seeing his idol. This reaction was too strange. It was completely incomprehensible. You are. After a long time, Li Ye's eyes became wet and his voice trembled. He was so excited that he almost couldn't stand. I am. Nie Tian nodded slightly, his eyes surging with indestructible determination. Chapter 10:20. Li Yi looked at the silver-haired young man in front of him and saw a familiar firmness. At this moment, he no longer had any doubts in his heart. He was sure that the silver-haired young man in front of him was his teacher, the former number 1 war god in the heaven realm, Nie Tian. In fact, a long time ago, when Nie Tian was fusing with the Ink Jade Dragon Sword, Li Yi had already sensed a shocking sword intent. At that time, he faintly felt that maybe Nie Tian was still alive. Just now, there was a very familiar aura on Nie Tian's body, and the latter's expression and eyes were exactly the same as in his previous life. Nie Tian's sword just now was not just to seriously injure Yun Han, but more importantly, he wanted Li Yi to recognize his sword intent. After confirming Nie Tian's identity, Li Yi could no longer control himself. He actually knelt in front of Nie Tian, and the tears in his eyes could no longer be restrained. The sudden scene made everyone at the scene petrified. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Many people's eyes were blurred, wondering if they were dreaming. Li Yi, one of the 4 Sumeru peaks, actually knelt in front of so many people in front of a silver-haired young man, and even called him teacher. Unless they saw it with their own eyes, no one would believe it. To everyone present, Li Yi was a legendary existence. But now, he suddenly knelt in front of another person. Moreover, that person was a young warrior who was only 20 years old. This kind of shock was indescribable. Everyone was dumbfounded, and they were about to have a nervous breakdown. Nie Tian was also stunned. He didn't expect Li Yi to be so excited. In fact, it was no wonder. He always knew that Li Yi was still alive, but the latter always thought that he was dead. Now that they met again, it was inevitable that he would lose control of his emotions. Mo Rushi looked at the scene in front of her, and her little face was extremely surprised. She suddenly reacted, walked to Nie Tian and whispered, Nie Tian, did he recognize the wrong person? Nie Tian was speechless and could only say, I'll explain to you later. Mo Rushi nodded, the corner of her lips curled up. She still felt that Li Yi had recognized the wrong person. Li Yi, get up first. Nie Tian stepped forward and motioned for Li Yi to stand up. Nie Tian really didn't want to be high profile, but with so many people watching, it would be hard for him not to be famous. Yes. Li Yi replied and stood up respectfully. At this moment, Tang Haifeng, who had been watching from the side, was completely dumbfounded. He opened his eyes wide as if he had seen a ghost. He looked at Nie Tian in horror, and there was only one thought in his mind. Run! Escape? The corners of Nie Tian's lips curled up as a cold light flashed in his eyes. Immediately after, a beam of sword light shot out, releasing a sharp sword intent. An unparalleled sword force bloomed in the air, directly pressing down on Tang Haifeng. With a muffled sound, Tang Haifeng was killed on the spot before he could even let out a scream. Not even his bones were left. Seeing this scene, the crowd was stunned once again. No matter what, Tang Haifeng was an elder of the Alchemist Guild. How could Nie Tian attack him without any scruples? How arrogant! Master, how should we deal with Yun Han? Li Yi glanced at Yun Han coldly and asked. He didn't ask how Yun Han offended Nie Tian, but directly asked how to deal with Yun Han. Because he knew that whoever Nie Tian wanted to kill, no matter who that person was, must die. No, don't kill me. Yun Han struggled to stand up, his face was full of fear. He originally thought that Li Yi would attack Nie Tian, but the scene in front of him was too dramatic. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Li Yi was actually on Nie Tian's side. I've already given you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. You can't blame me. Nie Tianling sneered, his eyes flashed coldly. Just now, he did give Yun Han a chance to live, but Yun Han didn't grasp it. Li Yi nodded and raised his palm. Once it fell, Yun Han would definitely die. Who dares to touch my father? At this moment, a sharp voice suddenly sounded, and a graceful middle-aged woman appeared in the void. Her brows were tightly knitted, and her expression was gloomy. Your Majesty! The crowd raised their heads and exclaimed when they saw the figure in the sky. The middle-aged woman who suddenly appeared was none other than the Empress of the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty, Yun Su. Yun Su was not only the Empress of the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty, but also Yun Han's daughter. Grandfather! At the next moment another voice sounded. It was a young man with a strange expression. Qian Long Ing Jing. Nie Tian raised his head and called out the other party's name. He didn't expect to meet Qian Long Ing Jing at this time. What surprised him even more was that Yun Han turned out to be Qian Long Ing Jing's grandfather. It's you. Qian Long Ing Jing saw Nie Tian's face clearly, and her eyes couldn't help but tremble. She exclaimed, Nie Tian! Nie Tian? Hearing this name, Yun Su was taken aback, and then a vicious glint flashed in her eyes. She said, You're that little bastard's brother? Although Yun Su had never met Nie Tian, she had heard of this name countless times. Nie Tian was Nie Yuro's brother, and Nie Yuro was the little princess who was deeply doted on by the Holy Light ancestor. In fact, she was a huge obstacle for Qian Long Ing Jing to inherit the Holy Light throne. Qian Long Ing told Yun Su that it was precisely because of Nie Tian that the Holy Light ancestor doted on Nie Yuro so much. Yun Su even heard that Nie Tian and the Holy Light ancestor had an arranged battle. Seeing Nie Tian now, Yun Su's heart was filled with endless hatred. She hated him to the bone. In Yun Su's heart, there was a secret that no one else knew except her. Back then, Nie Yuro was abandoned in the 3,000 small worlds because of her. However, back then, she had ordered a servant to kill Nie Yuro. She did not expect that Nie Yuro was not dead, and had even gone to the 3,000 small worlds. Nie Yuro's mother was a favored concubine of the Holy Light Emperor, and she had also died at her hands. Not only that, but many concubines had been killed by Yun Su. She had a nickname in the palace, the Poison Empress. Anyone who had even the slightest bit of the Emperor's favor would die at her hands. Because her father was Yun Han, even though the Holy Light Emperor knew that many people had been killed by her, he could only turn a blind eye. Little bastard? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he immediately realized that the little bastard that Yun Su was talking about was Nieyuro. Looking at Yun Su's vicious expression, it seemed that she was very disgusted with Nieyuro. Mother! Qian Long-ing reminded Yun Su to be careful. After all, there were too many people here, and Nieyuro was the most favored princess of the Holy Light Ancestor. Calling her a little bastard in public would be a slap to the Holy Light Ancestor's face. Chapter 10:21. Yun Su looked at Nie Tian viciously. She didn't look like an empress at all. She was like a crazy woman cursing in the street. Well, the onlookers looked at Yun Su speechlessly. They were all confused. Was she still the dignified and generous empress? Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and his face darkened. This crazy woman in front of him actually dared to insult Nieyuro like this. He couldn't stand it. Yun Su sensed the killing intent in Nie Tian's eyes and screamed disdainfully, "Do you want to kill me? Do you dare? I am the Empress of the Holy Light Empire. If you dare to touch a finger of mine, I guarantee that you will die without a burial place." This was the Holy Light Empire, and as the Empress, Yun Su was naturally fearless. However, she didn't think that Nie Tian would care about the life of an empress since he dared to kill the president of the Alchemists Guild. "You're courting death." A murderous intent flashed in Nie Tian's eyes, and a terrifying sword essence surged out of his body. A terrible aura of death bloomed in the air, and he directly attacked Yun Su. "You!" Yun Su was shocked. She didn't expect that Nie Tian would really dare to kill her. She was too weak, only in the heavenly evolution realm. Not to mention blocking Nie Tian's sword radiance. Even if she was affected by the sword radiance, she would definitely die on the spot. Qian Longyingzheng sensed the terrifying aura in the sword radiance and was scared silly. Who dares to touch her? At the critical moment, a low voice sounded in the void, and then a mighty aura rolled down, enveloping Yun Su and Qian Longyingzheng, successfully blocking Nie Tian's fatal sword. Huh! Eyebrows furrowed, Nie Tian turned to look at the figure floating in the air. The face was very familiar. The man also recognized Nie Tian and exclaimed, "It's you!" Great panic could be seen on his face. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly. It was indeed unexpected that the person who suddenly appeared to save Yun Su and her son turned out to be an assassin from the Heaven Realm, Zhang Yuan. He didn't expect to meet this person in a place like this. Nie Tian still remembered that there were two other people who came to the Shumi world with Zhang Yuan. One was a Heaven Emperor Realm martial artist, who was killed by Niechio, and the other was a sealing master, who escaped with Zhang Yuan. When Zhang Yuan escaped, he lost an arm, but it had now recovered. An assassin from the Heaven Realm is actually reduced to being someone else's guard? Nie Tian looked at Zhang Yuan and laughed coldly, his eyes filled with disdain. In the past, Nie Tian might have been afraid of him. However, now that his strength had reached the 9th layer Heaven-Human realm, there was no need for him to fear him at all. Zhang Yuan, Emperor, and Tian, Su Tian, is, was, Tian, and longed, mean. Not long ago, Nie Tian was only in the 5th level of the Heaven Realm. Now, he was already in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. The speed of his advancement was too abnormal. "Mr. Zhang, do you know this person?" Yun Su was stunned. She didn't expect Zhang Yuan to know Nie Tian. Zhang Yuan came to Holy Light Imperial City not long ago. He lost an arm and was saved by Yun Han. He is the person I want to kill. Zhang Yuan's eyes calmed down and flickered with coldness. Mr. Zhang, save me." At this moment, Yun Han suddenly spoke with strength that came out of nowhere. Speaking of which, he was Zhang Yuan's benefactor. It was all thanks to him that Zhang Yuan's arm could recover in such a short time. President Yun. Seeing that Yun Han was on the verge of death, Zhang Yuan's expression changed and he growled, "Let him go." "Let him go?" Nie Tian Tianling smiled coldly and said, "Do you think that's possible?" As he said, Nie Tian turned to look at Li Yi and spat out a word sinisterly, "Kill!" Li Yi did not hesitate in the slightest. A vast and mighty aura gushed out from his entire body, wanting to annihilate Yun Han thoroughly. "Stop!" Right at this time, Yun Su suddenly cried out and roared fiercely, "If you dare to kill my father, your younger sister will have to die." Amen? Nie Tian was suddenly taken aback. Waving his hand, he indicated for Li Yi to wait for a while. Following that, he looked at Yun Su and immediately sensed something amiss. He said solemnly, "Where's my ninth sister?" In an instant, Nie Tian suddenly detected the aura of a huge conspiracy. His divine sense sensed on Zhang Yuan's body, and his expression changed abruptly. The latter was actually already in the 9th level Heavenly Emperor's strength. Back then, Zhang Yuan had an arm chopped off by him inside the heaven shrouding barrier. He shouldn't have recovered so quickly. Furthermore, it was even more impossible for his strength to break through to the Heavenly Emperor realm. Could it be? Nie Tian suddenly thought of something, his expression changing slightly. 2 words appeared in his mind: illusionary flower blood lotus. He sensed with his divine sense. Indeed, he sensed the aura of the illusionary flower blood lotus on Zhang Yuan's body. Li Guijiang said before that the mystical flower valley had the illusionary flower blood lotus, and the mystical flower valley was controlled by Yun Han. Zhang Yuan must have absorbed the power of the illusionary flower blood lotus. That was why he could break through to the Heavenly Emperor realm. Moreover, judging from the aura on his body, he absolutely absorbed more than one illusionary flower blood lotus. Damn it! Thinking that the illusionary flower blood lotus was used up by Zhang Yuan, Nie Tian was even more furious in his heart. That was what he prepared to use to save Mo Rushi. Don't be anxious. You'll see her right away. Yun Su smiled sinisterly. The coldness in her eyes intensified. Teacher, I have a bad feeling. Maybe something happened in the palace. Li Yi was very smart and immediately guessed something. His face revealed great worry. Nie Tian forcefully barged into the Alchemist Association. But the Holy Light Ancestor and the Holy Light Emperor did not appear. This made Li Yi very worried. Moreover, he did not see the Holy Light Ancestor recently. The latter seemed to have disappeared into thin air. I know. Nie Tian nodded slightly. His eyes were bloodshot with anger. If Yun Su dared to hurt Nieyuro, he would make her suffer a fate worse than death. Nie Tian, I'll tell you the truth. Your sister is in my hands. That Holy Light Ancestor, who doesn't know what's good for him, is also in my hands. Yun Su's figure moved and she descended. She came to a place less than 100 meters away from Nie Tian. Her delicate features trembled slightly, looking a little twisted. I knew it! Nie Tian was slightly shocked. He had guessed something but was not too sure. Now that Yun Su had said it herself, things became clear. Yun Su must have sent someone to capture the Holy Light Ancestor and Nieyuro. As for who it was, Nie Tian had already guessed. It must be another assassin from the Heaven Realm, Ren Yihong. Moreover, Nie Tian was sure that Ren Yihong's strength had reached the Heavenly Emperor realm. He had also absorbed the power of the illusionary flower blood lotus. Get out of the way! Just then, an angry voice rang out. Then, a figure appeared. The crowd parted automatically, making way for that person. Nie Tian turned to look at the person. It was none other than Ren Yihong. Chapter 10:22. Ro-er. Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he saw Nieyuro, and he cried out in pain. Nieyuro was carried by a black-robed warrior. Her aura was very weak, and she was on the verge of death. The Holy Light Ancestor was even worse off. He was covered in blood, and his life was hanging by a thread. Nie Tian used his divine sense to check. The Holy Light Ancestor's Yuan meridians had been destroyed, and all the meridians in his body had collapsed. He could die at any time. Big brother Nie Tian. Chiu Ling was still conscious. When she saw Nie Tian, she shouted and cried. Ling Nie Tian's face darkened. Blood surged all over his body, and his eyes were bloodshot. His body trembled, and even his face became ferocious. He hadn't seen Nie Yuro and Chiu Ling for more than a year, and this was the scene they were seeing again. Nie Tian felt as if all the blood in his body was about to boil. He was breathing heavily, and he looked extremely terrifying. Ling don't panic. I will save you. You will be fine. Nie Tian forced himself to calm down and spoke in a low voice. The anger in his eyes seemed to be bursting out at any moment. Big brother Nie Tian, Chiu Ling turned to look at the unconscious Nie Yuro, her eyes trembling nervously. Ninth sister. Emo Rushi also screamed at this time, and her clear eyes burned with terrible anger. Princess Yuro. Li Yi was stunned, but he immediately realized that Nie Yuro was Nie Tian's sister. The onlookers were also stirred. Many people had already guessed what was going on, and the way they looked at Yun Su gradually changed. Who would have thought that the Empress would let someone hurt the Holy Light Ancestor? This was rebellion. At this time, everything was very clear. The father and daughter, Yun Han and Yun Su, healed Zhang Yuan and Rennie Hong, helped them reach the Heavenly Emperor realm, and then helped them take down the Holy Light Empire. Judging from the Holy Light Ancestor's injuries, he must have fought back fiercely, but in the end, he was no match for Rennie Hong. Nie Tian glanced at Rennie Hong, and immediately found that the latter had the strength of a heavenly emperor. Mother, what's going on? At this moment, Qian Longying seemed to have woken up from a dream and exclaimed, why did you hurt the patriarch? Qian Longying had no idea what was going on. She was so shocked by the scene before her that she finally reacted. Why? Yun Su asked back, then smiled evilly and said, Isn't it because of you? You're the crown prince of Holy Light Heaven Dynasty. However, the old ancestor favors that little b** starred. If it goes on like this, the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty would have an empress instead of an emperor. As Yun Su spoke, her gaze swept over Nie Yuro, filled with hatred. This little bastard didn't die 10 years ago, and now he was finally going to die. Mother, you. Qian Longying suddenly remembered something and asked, Where's father? Did you kill Imperial Father? Of course. Yun Su sneered and said, My good son, if your father doesn't die, how can you become the emperor? Don't tell me you still have to wait a few hundred years? You can wait, but Imperial Mother can't. You killed father. Qian Longying's expression was stiff, his face as pale as paper, and his eyes became empty as if he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. He wanted to be the emperor, but he never thought of becoming the emperor in such a way. Qian Longying's face was full of pain, and he kept shaking his head, unable to accept what was happening in front of him. Let them go. At this moment a furious roar sounded. Nie Tian didn't have the time to watch Yun Su and Qian Longying's family ethics. He wanted to save Nie Yuro and Chiu Ling. Let them go? Yun Su sneered and her face darkened. She said coldly, All right, I can let them go, but I want one person for one person. If you let my father go, I'll let one person go. How about that? No, I want you to let both of them go. Nie Tian's face was dark, and his voice was filled with extreme anger. He only had Yun Han in his hands. Who was he going to use this person to save? Nie Yuro or Chiu Ling? This wasn't a multiple-choice question, there was no answer to choose from. 1 for 2? Yun Su sneered. She smiled viciously and said, Do you think that's possible? Brother Nie Tian, I'm fine. Save Ro first. At this moment, Chiu Ling-er's voice sounded, and she looked at Nie Tian pleadingly. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. How could he make such a choice? He also saw Chiu Ling-er as his younger sister. How could he give up on her at this time? Calm down. Suddenly, Nie Tian roared in his heart, and he forced himself to calm down. His gaze became determined, and the divine glyphs in his divine sense suddenly became violent. He could clearly sense all the auras in front of him. At this time, a map of everyone's aura perception seemed to appear in his mind. Everyone's aura, strength, and even every move were seen clearly by him. The two people controlling Sister Jiao and Ling are at the 7th level of Heaven Human Realm. The Heaven Realm Assassin is at the 1st level of Heavenly Emperor Realm. I can attack in an instant and control these people. The remaining threat is the other Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artist in the sky. Nie Tian's gaze swept over, and he analyzed in his heart. Nie Tian, have you thought it through? Who will it be? Yun Su saw Nie Tian's gloomy face and thought that the latter was thinking. She smiled cold, very mockingly. Rushi, pay attention to the other person. Nie Tian ignored her and suddenly transmitted his voice to Emo Rushi. Emo Rushi was stunned for a moment, and then reacted, her gaze fixed on Zhang Yuan in the sky. Teacher! Li Yi sensed something, and his gaze could not help but tremble. Right at this time, Nie Tian's figure suddenly moved. His speed was fast to the extreme, like wind and lightning, and he actually left behind several afterimages in the air. Yun Su's eyes flickered, and she did not react for a moment. Absolute terror, open! In the air, Nie Tian's eyes flickered, and a stream of starlight surged out. Immediately, a huge spiritual deterrence was released. The spiritual deterrence surged in the void, and it strangely split into 3 forces, attacking Ren Yihong and the 2 people controlling Nie Yuro and Qiu Ling, respectively. Ren Yihong suddenly reacted, but a spiritual pressure descended, causing his soul to tremble, and his mind to fall into a trance. The 2 people behind Ren Yihong also did not have the time to react, and their minds directly fell into a trance. Right at this moment, Nie Tian's figure flew over like a gust of wind. A distance of 1,000 meters was actually crossed in the blink of an eye, and he appeared beside Nie Yuro and Qiu Ling, courting death. Almost at the same time, a fierce roar sounded in the sky. Zhang Yuan sensed that Nie Tian wanted to save them, and immediately moved. Behind him rose a sea of fire, and in the void, a huge flame aura blasted towards Nie Tian. When a heavenly emperor made a move, heaven and earth shook, and the space seemed to be on fire. Don't hurt him! At the moment when Zhang Yuan made a move, a delicate voice sounded from the ground, and then a fiery phoenix soared into the sky. Chapter 10:23. When the crowd saw this, they were all stunned. No one had expected that Nie Tian would suddenly make a move. This was the first time Nie Tian had used absolute tremor in such a way, and it was released on 3 people at the same time. It seemed that in that split second just now, the mysterious cauldron divine rune in his divine sense had caused his spiritual force to undergo some kind of miraculous change, and his perception had actually increased by several times. At this moment, everyone's aura was accurately grasped by him. It was as if a strange image had appeared in his mind, and everyone's aura was sensed on that image. Nie Tian's silhouette appeared in the blink of an eye, activating absolute tremor, causing Ren Yihong and the other 2 to fall into a trance. His entire body surged with a powerful aura and endless power wrapped around Nie Yuro and Qiu Ling. At that moment, the sky turned into a sea of flames. Zhang Yuan sensed that Nie Tian wanted to save him and immediately acted. At the same time, Emo Rushi also acted. Before Nie Tian rescued Zhang Yuan, he had already informed Emo Rushi to pay attention to Zhang Yuan. Up in the sky, Zhang Yuan slapped down with his palm. Surging flames wreaked havoc in the space, turning the area within 1,000 meters into a furnace. Even the air seemed to be burning. What a terrifying flame power! The eyes of the crowd trembled. The sea of flames around Zhang Yuan's body was extremely violent. If one looked closely, they would see that there was actually a layer of mysterious energy that was faintly changing the power of heaven and earth. That was the power of heaven and earth laws, a power that only Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artists could utilize. Mo Rushi's figure soared into the sky, and the phoenix wings behind her spread open. They were dozens of meters long, and they were like flaming blades tearing through the void. Huh! Zhang Yuan's eyes widened in shock when he saw a figure rushing towards him. A look of fear appeared on his face. He sensed an abnormally violent flame power from Mo Rushi's body, as if it could incinerate and devour everything. His flame power actually trembled in front of Mo Rushi, as if it had sensed a huge threat and was completely out of his control. How is this possible? Zhang Yuan's heart was filled with courage and shock. This was his own power, but he couldn't control it. It was too strange. Mo Rushi released the flames of the fire phoenix behind her. It was the divine fire of the ancient divine phoenix, and it could suppress almost all fire-attributed powers. Even the starry sky's sacred flame in Nie Tian's body was incomparable to the fire phoenix flame. Mo Rushi's body rushed forward, and a shadow of a fire phoenix appeared around her. The power of crimson flames flew through the air like a sharp blade. Although the aura was extremely hot, it made people feel a bone-piercing chill from the bottom of their hearts. Boom! The power of fire whistled past, and the sea of fire around Zhang Yuan's body was actually smashed to pieces. His face was filled with shock, and his mouth was wide open, but he couldn't make a single sound. His entire body was directly incinerated into nothingness, and not even ashes were left. A Heaven Realm assassin, a first-level Heavenly Emperor strength martial artist, died tragically just like that, without leaving behind even his bones. This! People gasped when they saw the scene in the sky, and they looked at Mo Rushi with fear in their eyes. Before Mo Rushi made her move, no one paid any attention to her existence, thinking that she was just an ordinary girl who was at most a little beautiful. However, the scene in front of them completely shocked them. It turned out that this beautiful girl's strength was so valiant. It seemed like Mo Rushi's strength was even stronger than Nie Tian's. When Li Yi saw Mo Rushi kill Zhang Yuan in one move, he was directly petrified on the spot. Originally, he had already sensed what Nie Tian wanted to do and was already prepared to make a move, but he didn't expect Mo Rushi to be a step ahead of him. Previously, he also didn't pay too much attention to Mo Rushi. At this moment, he suddenly discovered that the latter actually had the strength of a Heavenly Emperor martial artist. Li Ye's first reaction was that it was impossible. However, when he thought that Mo Rushi was someone following by Nie Tian's side, his heart was much calmer. When Mo Rushi saw that Zhang Yuan was killed in one move, her brows furrowed, and she was actually very surprised. She also didn't expect that the latter was actually so weak. Mo Rushi was able to kill Zhang Yuan in one move. Apart from her own strength being strong enough, another important reason was that Zhang Yuan was a fire attribute martial artist, and he was completely suppressed by Mo Rushi. This kind of suppression was destructive, and Zhang Yuan's strength couldn't be unleashed at all. Mo Rushi's gaze looked towards the ground. Nie Tian had already successfully saved Nie Yuro and Qiu Ling. Nie Tian sensed Nie Yuro's aura. Although it was weak, it was very stable, and her life shouldn't be in danger. Big brother Nie Tian. Qiu Ling saw Nie Tian, and she cried out in grief. She couldn't hold back her tears anymore, and she burst into tears. Rushi, come and look after them. When Nie Tian heard Qiu Ling's crying, the anger in his heart burned even more. He said to Mo Rushi, and then he took a step forward, and killing intent rose from his body. At this time, Renyi Hong had already woken up, and his eyes were filled with astonishment. Just now, when he was in a trance, he seemed to have seen Zhang Yuan being engulfed by a flame. When he confirmed that the scene was not an illusion, his whole body stiffened, and his eyes revealed great shock. You want to kill me? In the next moment, Renyi Hong felt a cold, killing intent enveloping him, and he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes, and the fear on his face intensified. This killing intent was too strong, and it revealed extreme cold-bloodedness and ruthlessness. An assassin from the heaven realm? Nie Tion's eyes were bloodshot, and the anger in his body turned into a monstrous, killing intent. He suddenly roared, "I'll kill you!" As his violent voice fell, Nie Tion's figure moved, and the sword Absolute Heaven Slash appeared in his hand. The sword intent around him condensed into a giant sword shadow, and it surged with killing intent. Die! As the sharp voice fell, the sword burning with the starry sky sacred flame slashed down, and in an instant, the space shook violently, as if the heaven and earth were about to collapse. When Ren'Yi Hong saw the giant flaming sword above his head, he was stunned for a moment, and by the time he reacted, it was too late. In a battle between the strong, life and death could be decided in an instant. The aura around Ren'Yi Hong's body exploded, and he mobilized the laws of heaven and earth in an attempt to resist the fatal sword that was pressing down on his head. But unfortunately, he was one step too late. The fatal sword fell directly before he could gather his aura. Boom! There was a deafening sound, and the heaven and earth trembled. The huge sword intent surged like a monstrous wave, and terrible cracks appeared on the ground. Ren'Yi Hong's figure was directly swallowed by the sword intent, and on the ground, there was a deep ravine that was thousands of meters long, as if the earth was damaged by an earthquake. Rumble! In the distance, the entire alchemist guild shook, and it began to collapse continuously, setting off turbid waves that soared into the sky. The shocking scene made everyone's eyes widen, and they were all dumbfounded. Countless pairs of eyes stared at Nie Tion, and all of them had a look of disbelief. The scene fell into a dead silence. Nie Tion's sword was too strong. Not only did it kill Ren'Yi Hong, but it also killed a few people around him. Chapter 10:24. The atmosphere in the huge square was dead silent. Everyone stared at the silver-haired figure with the sword in his hand. Their nerves were taut, and they did not even dare to breathe loudly. Nie Tion stood there, the sword intent around him still surging wildly. The murderous intent on his face had not dissipated. Suddenly, he turned around and locked his cold eyes on Yun-Su. Yun-Su was in a daze. Her eyes were wide open and her mouth was slightly open, but no sound came out. Everything that had happened was too shocking. She could not react at all. Zhang Yuan and Ren'Yi Hong were both heavenly emperors. How could they be killed in an instant? The situation had changed too quickly. She could not accept it at all. The dog that bit for you is dead. It's your turn now. Nie Tion's voice was low. He took a step forward and a cold aura filled the air. Nie Yuro and Qiu Ling were in danger because of this woman. How could he let the culprit go? You can't. Yun-Su suddenly felt a suffocating murderous intent shrouding her. It was as if the space around her had stopped, frozen by the murderous intent. Her lips trembled and her voice trembled. Before she could finish, a sword ray flashed in the air, and the sound of flesh being pierced could be heard. Yun-Su felt a chill on her neck, and a gust of cold wind penetrated her body. Her vitality was cut off in an instant. Her body trembled, and she fell to the ground, dead. Dead? The crowd was stunned. They looked at the corpse on the ground in disbelief. In the blink of an eye, Yun-Su and the others were all dead. Such a dramatic turn of events made everyone feel dizzy, and they could not react for a long time. Mother! Just then, a howl sounded. It was Qian Long Yingjing, who pounced on Yun-Su's corpse. No matter what Yun-Su had done, she was still Qian Long Yingjing's mother. Nie Tion glanced at Qian Long Yingjing, but he retracted his murderous intent. Qian Long Yingjing did not know the whole thing, so there was no need for Nie Tion to kill him. Teacher. Li Yi walked over. He had already killed Yun Han. Li Yi, I'll leave this to you, Nie Tion said solemnly. He wasn't sure of Nie Yuro's condition, so he needed to find a place to properly examine her body. Yes. Li Yi nodded solemnly. Teacher, my residence is nearby. I'll have someone take you there. Li Yi was very meticulous and thought of everything thoroughly. Father. At that moment a familiar figure appeared. It was Li Yulai. Nie Tian and Li Yulai had met before, and they had even exchanged blows. Yulai, come and pay your respects to your Grand Master, Li Yi said with a smile. Li Yulai was stunned and only reacted after a long time. He had no choice but to kneel in front of Nie Tian. Yulai greets Grandmaster. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the youth from the 3,000 small worlds would actually be his Grandmaster. At this moment, Li Yulai also understood why Nie Tian did not allow the ancient dragon soul to kill him. Then, Nie Tian did not stay any longer. He left the rest of the mess to Li Yi to deal with, and followed Li Yulai to the Li residence. Corpse Luo, is ninth sister all right? In the room, Nie Tian's expression was nervous. His forehead was covered in beads of sweat. He had already checked Nie Yuro's body, and did not find anything abnormal. But the strange thing was that Nie Yuro's aura was very weak, and her consciousness was in a coma. Nie Tian did not know what was going on, so he let Corpse Luo Demon Lord check again. Corpse Luo Demon Lord also frowned at this moment. His expression was not very good. He pondered for a moment before saying, her Yuan spirit Yuan meridian is normal, but the 1,000-gem illusory seal in her body seems to have been stimulated by something. It has become very strange, as if it is sealing itself. Sealing itself? Nie Tian was stunned. He did not understand what Corpse Luo Demon Lord meant. This is a self-protection method of the 1,000-gem seal. When it is threatened, it will reverse from an awakened state to a sealed state. Corpse Luo Demon Lord explained, it is because of this that her aura has become very weak. Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. He had only heard of illusory seals awakening. He had never heard of illusory seals being able to seal themselves. Nie Tian thought for a moment and asked, 1,000-gem illusory seal sealing itself, what harm is there to ninth sister? Will her life be in danger? There is no danger to her life. Corpse Luo shook his head and said, but after the illusory seal is sealed, her martial arts talent will be reduced. Her Yuan spirit and Yuan meridian will also be affected and weakened. Nie Tian nodded. As long as there was no danger to her life, then he asked, after the 1,000-gem illusory seal seals itself, can it be awakened again? Corpse Luo Demon Lord frowned and said, in theory, yes, but it is very difficult to awaken again. If there is no special opportunity, it will be very difficult to awaken again. Nie Tian frowned and his expression was somewhat gloomy. Zhang Yuan and the others must have done something to Nie Yuro that caused the 1,000-gem illusory seal in her body to seal itself. Fortunately, Nie Yuro's life was not in danger. If her talent was weak, then so be it. In any case, she was still young. There would be a chance to awaken the 1,000-gem illusory seal again in the future. Corpse Luo, when will ninth sister wake up? Nie Tian could feel that Nie Yuro's consciousness was in a coma and could not help but ask worriedly. She will wake up after the illusory seal ends. It will take about 5 to 10 days. Corpse Luo Demon Lord nodded and then returned to the chaotic origin coffin. Nie Tian let out a long breath of foul air, feeling somewhat relieved. Nie Yuro's current strength was already very strong. She had actually reached the 9th level of heavenly evolution. It should be known that she was only 13 years old. In his previous life, when Nie Tian was 13 years old, he also did not have a cultivation of the 9th level of heavenly evolution. Ninth sister, don't worry. I will find a way to let you awaken the 1,000-gem illusory seal again. Nie Tian looked at the still unconscious Nie Yuro and murmured, then left first. Following that, Nie Tian visited Qiu Ling. After making sure that the latter was fine, he asked Imo Rushi to accompany Qiu Ling, first before he left the residence and headed to Li Guijiang's place. A moment later, Nie Tian arrived at Li Guijiang's shabby little courtyard. Mr. Qiu Shan could not help but shout when he saw Nie Tian appear. He had seen the battle at the Alchemist's Guild just now, but he remembered the task that Nie Tian had given him, so he did not dare to leave and stayed by Li Guijiang's side. More importantly, Qiu Shan believed that with Nie Tian's strength, he would be able to deal with any enemy. Nie Tian nodded slightly. After seeing Li Guijiang again, he did not linger and headed to the Mystical Flower Valley with the latter. The Mystical Flower Valley was located at the edge of the third outer city of Holy Light Imperial City. It was a very secretive place. Along the way, Li Guijiang was shocked when he learned about what had happened at the Alchemist's Guild. He did not expect that Nie Tian would kill Yunhan, Tang Haifeng, and the others. A few hours later, Nie Tian and the others appeared outside a valley. Chapter 1025. Ice Fire Dragon Grass, Beast King Spirit Sprout, Celestial Precious Root, Golden Lion Fruit and… Nie Tian stood outside the exotic flower valley and suddenly said the names of many spiritual herbs. Then, his eyes trembled strangely and his throat moved. He said 4 words, Magic Flower Blood Lotus. How is this possible? Li Guijiang screamed when he heard what Nie Tian said. He froze on the spot and looked at Nie Tian in disbelief. The names that Nie Tian said were all kinds of exotic flowers in the exotic flower valley. But they were hundreds of meters away from the exotic flower valley. Could Nie Tian's eyes see through everything? And Nie Tian was obviously very familiar with these exotic flowers. Who was he? Was he an alchemist or an exotic flower master? Li Guijiang's guess was right. Nie Tian's eyes did have the ability to see through things, but he didn't use starry eyes at this time. Nie Tian was just relying on the fragrance of the flowers around him, and then all kinds of exotic flower patterns appeared in his mind, as if he was already inside them. What's going on? At this time, Nie Tian suddenly realized something. His pupils shrank slightly and his face showed a look of surprise. When he was feeling the fragrance of the flowers just now, he could actually distinguish all the fragrances one by one, and then the scene inside the exotic flower valley appeared in his mind. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, and his expression was one of astonishment. His perception seemed to have suddenly increased by more than several times. In the past, he could barely distinguish the aura of some spiritual herbs among many spiritual herbs, but it was definitely not as easy as it was now. At this time, his perception had simply taken a qualitative leap. It seemed that as long as his divine sense swept over, a picture of divine sense would appear in his mind. And this picture was very strange. It was not a normal visual picture, but a picture formed according to the aura of the perception. This is too strange. Nie Tian was stiff for a few seconds before he finally reacted, but he was still shocked. He remembered that when Nie Yuro and Qiu Ling were in danger, there seemed to be some kind of mysterious fusion between his divine sense and the mysterious cauldron divine rune, and then this strange picture would appear in his mind. Elder Li, let's go in first. Nie Tian suppressed the shock in his heart and gestured for Li Guijiang to enter the valley. Li Guijiang looked at the mystical flower valley in front of him. His expression moved, and tears streamed down his face. This was the flower valley that he had spent his entire life building, but it was snatched away by Yunhan. Now that he could return to the flower valley, he was naturally excited. At this time, several figures walked out of the mystical flower valley. They were the guards of the mystical flower valley and the gardeners. You are Lord Nie Tian. When the leader of the group saw Nie Tian, his voice trembled as he called out respectfully, not even daring to raise his head. Although it had only been half a day, the news that Nie Tian had killed Yunhan had spread throughout the Holy Light Empire. Moreover, everyone already knew that the Holy Light Empire had completely changed because of the arrival of Nie Tian. Everything in the mystical flower valley will remain the same. From today on, Elder Li is the valley master of the mystical flower valley. In the future, everything in the mystical flower valley will be under his command. Nie Tian said in a deep voice, and then suddenly raised his voice. Did you hear that? The gloomy voice exploded in everyone's heart like a clap of thunder, making them tremble from the depths of their souls. In an instant, they felt as if they had fallen into hell, filled with fear and despair. Nie Tian knew that Li Yi must have already informed the people here. Now he was doing all this to deter these people. Li Yi was a meticulous person. He thought of everything very thoroughly. Yes. Everyone came to their senses and nodded repeatedly. The moment of despair just now made them realize how terrifying Nie Tian was. Elder Li, please. Nie Tian regained his composure and smiled faintly. Li Guizhang's body trembled with excitement, as if he had seen his child that he hadn't seen for many years. He directly rushed into the mystical flower valley. Nie Tian and Qiushan exchanged a glance and followed him into the valley. My flowers! When Li Guizhang arrived at the mystical flower valley, he was like a madman. He kept screaming and looking at the various flowers in the mystical flower valley. As expected of the mystical flower valley, Nie Tian couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the scenery around him. In the mystical flower valley, hundreds of flowers were in full bloom, competing with each other for beauty, and it was full of vitality. Qiushan's expression was also somewhat dumbfounded. Although he basically didn't recognize these flowers, the exuberant vitality and rich aura had already shocked him. After a moment, Nie Tian became cold. He once again sensed the aura of the mystical flower valley, and the entire power of heaven and earth spread out in his mind. What a powerful spiritual qi vein! The scene of the underground mine appeared in Nie Tian's mind. The rich spiritual qi of heaven and earth made his eyes tremble, and he exclaimed in surprise. No wonder so many strange flowers could be bred here. It turned out that there was a spiritual qi vein in the underground of the valley. Nie Tian examined himself with rapt attention, and discovered that the spiritual qi veins in the wondrous flower valley were even vaster than the ones in the 3,000 small worlds. They even extended thousands of meters into the ground, like a bottomless pit of spiritual qi that would never be used up. This place is very good. Nie Tian was slightly excited. This kind of place was enough for a 9th-rank spiritual material to grow comfortably. At this time, Nie Tian already had an idea in his mind. When he returned to the heaven realm, he must get a lot of 9th-rank spiritual materials and cultivate them in the mystical flower valley, turning the mystical flower valley into a base for cultivating 9th-rank spiritual materials. Lord Nie Tian, please follow me. At this time, Li Guizhang finally regained his composure and came to Nie Tian's side and said. Nie Tian nodded, and then came to the depths of the mystical flower valley. A clear lake appeared in front of him. Nie Tian's gaze touched the lake. In the center of the lake there was a bright red, which made his eyes tremble. The center of the lake was filled with blood-red flowers. From afar it looked like a scarlet flame surging in the water. Illusory flower blood lotus. Nie Tian blurted out in a daze, almost holding his breath. There were dozens of illusion flower blood lotuses in front of him. Moreover, they were connected in a row, which gave people a strong visual impact. Sigh. At this time, Li Guizhang sighed and said, originally, the illusion flower blood lotuses filled the blood lotus lake. I didn't expect that there would only be so many left. Nie Tian was stunned. So this was originally a blood lotus lake. It seemed that Yun Han and the others had wasted a lot of illusion flower blood lotuses. Thinking of this, Nie Tian's heart ached. The illusion flower blood lotuses were the flower that saved Mo Rushi's life. But it was too late now. With so many illusion flower blood lotuses, Mo Rushi would be safe for the time being. Elderly, how long do you need to cultivate the illusion flower blood lotuses again? Nie Tian thought for a moment and asked. About half a year. Elderly sighed. Looking at the scarlet flame in front of him, he felt his heart ache. Nie Tian nodded. This kind of thing couldn't be rushed. Nie Tian thought for a moment and left for the time being. He planned to return to the mystical flower valley 3 months later and let the illusion flower blood lotuses grow for a period of time. Chapter 10:26. After returning to the mansion, Nye Tian was still worried. He went to check on Nye Yuro and Chiu Linger to make sure that they were fine. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. Then, Nye Tian returned to his room. There were some things that he didn't understand, so he had to ask the Sword Elder. You said that in your mind, there will be an image formed by aura? The Sword Elder was stunned after listening to Nye Tian's words. He immediately said, Try again. Nye Tian nodded and immediately spread out his divine sense. Within the radius of his divine sense, everything was perceived by him. A tree, a stone, a grass, a flower, and even the aura of everyone around him appeared. An image formed by aura appeared in Nye Tian's mind. This image was very different from a real visual image, but it made Nye Tian feel that it was clearer than a visual image. He could perceive the outline of every inch of the image, even the trend of every movement, and even the trend of the entire image. Holographic projection. The Sword Elder perceived the image in Nye Tian's mind. He was stiff for a full 10 seconds. The corner of his mouth slightly trembled as he said these words. Holographic projection? Nye Tian's face was full of surprise. He didn't know what the Sword Elder was talking about. Nye Tian, when did you get this ability? The Sword Elder didn't care about Nye Tian's doubts and nervously asked. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, then he immediately told the Sword Elder what had happened before. The mysterious cauldron's divine sense and the divine sense have fused together. The Sword Elder was surprised and immediately said, What about the 3-legged mysterious cauldron? Let me see. Nye Tian saw the Sword Elder's reaction and quickly took out the 3-legged mysterious cauldron. This is... The Sword Elder saw the 3-legged mysterious cauldron and his whole expression became stupid. He couldn't speak for a long time. Nye Tian was also stunned and stared blankly at the Sword Elder. Holographic mysterious cauldron. This is a holographic mysterious cauldron. After a while, the Sword Elder finally had a reaction. He directly shouted and his voice became sharp. Holographic mysterious cauldron? Nye Tian was stunned again. He clearly remembered that this was the 3-legged mysterious cauldron. Brat, your luck is really off the charts. To actually be able to obtain the legendary holographic profound cauldron and even fuse with the holographic divine imprints, this dogsh *T luck truly makes one's hair stand on end. The Sword Elder was incomparably agitated, even the tone of his voice had changed. Seeing the Sword Elder's reaction, Nye Tian's face slightly changed. His eyes revealed a hint of surprise. For the Sword Elder to be so surprised, it was definitely something good. The 3-legged profound cauldron seemed to be more terrifying than he had imagined. Nye Tian, this mysterious cauldron is called the holographic mysterious cauldron. According to the legends, it is a mysterious cauldron from the ancient times. The Sword Elder calmed down a little, but his voice was filled with excitement. A profound cauldron from the primordial era? Nye Tian couldn't help but be shocked. Very few warriors had heard of the immemorial era. It was an era even more ancient than the ancient era. It was also known as the Sage Era. Generally, it only existed in ancient books and was almost a legend. Yes. The Sword Elder nodded heavily and said, The divine rune engraved on the holographic mysterious cauldron is called the holographic divine rune. It is a kind of divine rune that can perceive the heaven and earth and surpass the great Tao. According to the legends, those who have completely comprehended the holographic divine rune can perceive the entire world and contain the entire world in their mind and soul. Everything in the entire world can be perceived and projected in their mind. So abnormal? Nye Tian was stunned. The blazing passion in his eyes was hard to describe. Perceiving the entire world and containing everything in their mind, wasn't this the omniscient sage? Nie Tian couldn't imagine how terrifying an existence of this level was. The holographic divine rune was indeed a very terrifying thing. Nie Tian, you don't have much understanding of the holographic divine rune yet. Wait until you have more understanding, then you will know how terrifying the holographic divine rune is. The Sword Elder's eyes trembled as he said in a deep voice. In fact, he hadn't said the true horror of the holographic divine rune. According to the legends, those who have comprehended the holographic divine rune can not only contain the entire world in their mind, but they can also change the power of the world through the divine rune and change the great Tao of heaven and earth. When a sage is angry, the heavens and earth will collapse. This was definitely not as simple as the legends. The Sword Elder was afraid of scaring Nie Tian, so he didn't say it out loud. I already know how terrifying the holographic divine rune is. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment as he murmured. If not for the holographic divine rune, he wouldn't have been able to save Nie Yuro and Xiao Ling. His spiritual attack could be cast on several people at the same time. This was definitely related to the holographic divine rune. Moreover, the holographic divine rune allowed him to have the ability to project holographic images. This kind of perception could only be described as terrifying. Nie Tian felt that the holographic projection was definitely more powerful than Jean de Bao's 3,000 seals of demons and gods. At this moment, as long as Nie Tian's divine sense was activated, anything within 5,000 meters of him would be perfectly captured by him. If he had the ability to project holographic images earlier, he would definitely be able to sense the person who imprinted Mo Rushi's body. Imprint of a saint, who did it? When Nie Tian thought of this matter, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and a faint killing intent surged around him. Nie Tian, the matter of the holographic divine rune is the biggest secret. You must not tell anyone. Also, do not reveal the holographic profound cauldron again. The Sword Elder warned Nie Tian. If anyone else knew that the holographic profound cauldron was in Nie Tian's hands, it would definitely bring him endless disaster. Nie Tian nodded heavily. Unless he was a fool, he would not reveal the matter of the holographic divine rune. After understanding the horror of the holographic divine rune, the excitement in Nie Tian's heart could be imagined. He didn't have much understanding of the holographic divine rune, but the holographic divine rune had fused with his divine sense, so his perception had a qualitative leap, and he even had the ability to project holographic images. In the future, I must properly comprehend the holographic divine rune. This thing is too abnormal. Nie Tian murmured, his heart gradually calming down. Next, it was time to meet Li Yi. After recognizing each other as master and disciple, there was still no time to talk properly. A moment later, Nie Tian appeared in the Li residence's main hall. Li Yi dismissed everyone, leaving only the master and disciple in the main hall. Teacher! Li Yi's face was moved. He knelt in front of Nie Tian, like a child, his eyes filled with tears. If this scene was seen by others, they would definitely laugh their teeth off. Li Yi was a peak expert of the Sumer world, but he was actually crying in front of a young man. What a scandal! Nie Tian knew that Li Yi must have been grieving in his heart all these years, so he didn't stop him. Li Yi was the one with the worst martial arts talent among his 9 disciples, but he was the one who made Nie Tian feel the most at ease. Li Yi's thoughts were extremely meticulous, which made Nie Tian feel at ease to hand over anything to him. After a long time, Li Yi finally regained his calm, his eyes were still wet, and he asked, "Teacher, what happened to you?